Welcome to the party, pal. Your from the neighborhood Master Chaos back with you once again. And tonight I've got a very, very special guest. We're going to get sweaty with Mondo Digital's Nathaniel Thompson. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm so excited for this conversation because you know we had Troy on, and you guys are sort of like the tag team of commentaries, and I was like, you know, we talked giallos with him, and I said I got to find something really interesting to talk with Nathaniel about, and I suggested sleazy movies, and you're like, yeah, let's do it. And I was impressed, and I probably shouldn't be because you know your shit, that you put a list together so quickly of your top 20 movies. Is this something that's been floating around in your head for a while, maybe?
Well, you know, it's like when you catch me in that headspace, I just kind of rattle them right off. Like if you ask me that question like 6 weeks from now, I might give you a totally different list. But you know, that's just where I am. And that's what you're going to get.
Gotcha. I love it. Let me check in with the chat real quick. Indie Phantom, welcome, my friend. You have to take off for work. No problems, man. Catch it when you can. Razor, a patron of mine. Good to see you, Razor. I hope you're doing well. Timothy in the house. Just Dave, another patron. Hello, my friend. And Reject Films. What's up, man? I hope you're doing well. Mike Barrett, it's good to hear from you as well. It is sleazy time. But before, well, first of all, let me shine a light on my guest, and then I've got a little bit of a rant that I want to go on, and then the rest of the time will be sleazy. But Mondo Digital, tell us about Mondo Digital.
So Mondo Digital is a site that I started way back in the, not quite the beginning of the internet days, but fairly early on, about 1998. So it's well past 2 decades right now. This was something I started back in school because there were no websites really at the time that focused on trashy movies and kind of arty movies. Like it was either one or the other. But I grew up reading stuff like, you know, Fangoria, the Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film, that kind of stuff, Deep Red Magazine. But I also kind of loved foreign films, but they kind of intersected a lot. And this was kind of before directors like Mario Bava were considered both, you know. And, you know, so I just figured that was kind of a niche that needed to be filled. And I don't think any other sites quite do the same thing to this day. So I cover just what I call it weird movies. You know, it can be, you know, like a weird art film, or it can be just a completely trashy, you know, piece of crap. Or sometimes it's the same thing at once.
Yeah, you find that quite a bit, especially when it comes to boutique labels. There's a lot of crossover with that, you know, for better or worse. Guys, the link for Mondo, well, I mean, it's easy to find if you don't know, mondodigital.com, Mondo/digital, right?
Yeah, -digital.com.
Yeah. So I'll put it in the descriptions when the show's over, but go check it out if you haven't already. I mean, you pretty much have new reviews up, you know, pretty early, right? Before people even get their discs.
Yeah, usually they tend to come pretty early on. I mean, that's kind of it is when you're on the list, you can request stuff that you get early. And like I said, I don't do like star ratings. You'll notice I don't do stuff where it's like, oh, 3 stars out of 5, video quality, da. I've never done that because I don't think that's useful. Like I'm not going to compare, you know, an Andy Milligan movie to Apocalypse Now. I mean, that's stupid. You know, it's like, how do you even grade these on the same scale? So it's more about how does it compare to the other versions that are out there? What kind of movie is it? It's something that will appeal to you. And I kind of let you decide, yeah, I want to watch this, or this doesn't sound like my thing.
Gotcha. That's definitely a fun perk to have to get your hands on these things in advance. I love that. So yeah, guys, go check out that site. Bumpy is here. He says Thompson is a must follow on Letterboxd. There you go. And there you go. Make sure you do find that. Video store review, welcome. He says I've got an extra £100 to spend on movies this month, so I'm excited to discover some new titles tonight. Oh, you will. Yeah. You will. When he sent the list over, I knew a little bit. Well, I knew most of them. There were maybe 5 or 6 that stood out as titles I'd never heard of. So I'm excited to dig into that. Before we continue, I do want to highlight something. This is sort of off topic, but this just popped up. And you know, we always talk about sales here. Synapse is having a sale through MVD. And there are a lot of sleazy titles for sale here through Synapse. So if you guys are interested, and Video Store, if you don't find anything in tonight's list, you can always go visit MVD and check out the Synapse sale, which I think is a summer sale. So it runs until the 29th. All right, there you go. So that's my sales plug for the show. Now, before before we get sleazy, I do want to talk about something. I need some alcohol for this, so I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with a little rum because I feel like rum is the sleaziest drink. It's it's like an island drink. It's like, all right, sure, I picture oh my god, I'm blanking on her name now. Laura Gemser, sipping some rum, and casually her boob falls out. That happens, right?
Yeah.
By the way,
this is J&B anyway.
Oh yeah, I'm all out of J&B, so that's the problem. This is my Pim Test Kitchen cup from Disney, which I don't know if you guys have been to. What the hell is it called? Avengers Campus. Mm-hmm. I wasn't impressed. I was not impressed. But anyway, we're not talking about that. I need this because I do want to talk about something that just dropped today, and spoilers. I'm saying that now in case you care about Masters of the Universe of Revelation. Now, to be fair, I have not watched it, but I have read a lot of reviews. I have read quite a bit of the fallout on Twitter and things like that, and I'm shocked and I'm appalled, and I honestly don't even understand why this decision was made. Nathaniel, are you familiar with the show? Do you know the mm-hmm. controversy behind this? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, spoilers for the show. And the reason I'm giving you spoilers is because it's a warning. You can still watch it if you want, but it's something that I feel will affect a lot of people that watch this channel and kind of grew up in the same way that I did. They kill everybody. They kill everybody in the show. That's not a joke. And I thought it was at first, like, no way. No, it's true. He-Man and Skeletor die in the first episode, and then it just continues from there. Orko dies. You cannot kill Orko. No, I'm sorry. If Orko had lived, I would have been okay with it. But Orko gets killed. A ton of other villains get killed. The point is this. I have no problem with strong female leads. What my favorite genre is horror. That's full of strong female leads. And that's something people forget. Strong female leads are the number one ingredient in a horror movie. It's rare to find a horror movie that's a strong male lead. So it's not that. The problem is the show is Masters of the Universe. And there's no Masters of the Universe in my mind without He-Man, without Skeletor, without Orko, without those characters that we've grown to love. And I feel it's a cheap shot to the fandom, and I don't like to get political on this, but I feel it was like their excuse to make it a girl-centric show. And it wasn't like Tila wasn't a big part of the show to begin with. They could have been partners. They could have teamed up. It feels to me like the most recent Terminator movie, Dark Fury, Dark Fate, whatever the hell it's called. It does the same thing in that movie. You basically gutted your entire franchise in the opening scene. And I hate that they do that. And it's awful. And it's disappointing. So, warning going into that show, this is one that not going to crush your childhood, but it's certainly going to disappoint you because it's not what they're selling, and that's the worst part. They're tricking you into believing that this is Masters of the Universe when it's really not that at all. They just want to burn it all to the ground, and that's unfortunate. All right. I'm off my soapbox. I'm done with my rant. Let's talk boobies and other things. What are your thoughts on the show, Nathaniel?
Well, I just got to add to what you're saying, though. You know what? If you're like a kid like me, if you were a kid growing up watching slasher movies, you're used to this stuff, though, because if you've seen a Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, where they pretty much got the entire cast from Part 3 in the first 20 minutes, you kind of just rolled it at this point. It's like you're used to having people that you're attached to just get wiped out at the beginning. So.
Yeah, it's fine, but I expect it in a horror movie because you have the villain is the star. I don't care who the final girl is. We come back for Jason. We come back for Freddy. So kill everybody that survived. That's fine, except Sydney. You can't touch Sydney. Hope they don't kill her off in Scream 5 or whatever the hell they're calling it. But yeah, I mean, if this, discovers a whole new bunch of fans, fine. But I hope they don't keep doing that because it sucks. And to me, it ruins Star Wars. It's a whole other conversation. But that's where I'm at with that one. George is here. Welcome, George. And Timothy says, worse than Jersey Girl. Worse than Jersey Girl. Yes, indeed. Worse than Jersey Girl. All right. He-Man has left this mortal coil, but we still have plenty of sleazy movies to talk about. Nathaniel, take it away.
All right. So just a couple of quick ground rules. First of all, the word sleazy, I think, means different things to different people. So I just want to say where I'm coming from with this. The textbook definition of sleazy is something that is sordid, corrupt, or immoral. I'm going to focus on sordid because that's the fun part to me. And I don't think calling a movie's immoral really gets you anywhere. With that said, I think one thing that I would consider kind of immoral is when you kill animals for real or torture them in a movie. And I'm not going to do that. So you will not find Cannibal Holocaust or Make Them Die Slowly, stuff like that, or God Help Us, Melancholy of the Angels. Like, those movies aren't going to be in this batch because I don't want to talk about it. It's depressing and gross. So I'm hurting the animals on this show, which is kind of odd considering my number 2 choice is one of the touchiest movies ever made. But they don't hurt animals, and it's all fake and simulated. So just, we're going to be touching on some kind of taboo topics on the show. Just warning you if you're easily offended, which hopefully you're not if you're watching this. And again, this is just my personal opinion at the moment. There are tons of movies that could have gone on this list. So feel free to suggest some. We might do some runners up at the end if you want. Up to you, because there's hundreds more we could talk about. So,
sure.
All right. So that said, should we start with number 1?
Let's go.
All right. So my number 1, I have this fascination with movies that get major theatrical releases on hundreds, if not thousands, of screens that you can't believe audiences went to go see, even if they were bombed. So we're talking stuff like Color of Night, Showgirl, stuff like that, all of which have their sleaze factor. But my number 1 choice is the movie Cruisin from 1980 by William Friedkin, which is an incredible movie. This was very controversial when it was being shot. It was perceived at the time by the LGBT community as being very negative because it's about someone who's preying on kind of the S&M underworld in New York City. It's not about the gay life in general at the time, but it's about the sort of subset. It's about the leather bars that someone's killing these guys. And it was based on a book, which was more about kind of your average like Wall Street gay guys getting picked off by a killer. It was more of a whodunit. And I guess Friedkin had been exposed to this sort of leather community, and like other guys had tried to do this movie. Brian De Palma at one point was attached, and he wound up using some of the ideas in Dress to Kill, which was also super controversial and came out right on the heels of this one. 1980 was a really messed up year. We're going to be touching on 1980 a lot. I think that is like the Mount Everest year for sleaze movies. I don't know what everybody was sniffing or drinking or whatever from like mid 79 to mid 81, but God bless them. We got some really glorious messed up movies around that time. But so Cruisin as we have it now, it stars Al Pacino as this cop who is essentially recruited to go undercover because he fits the physical type of someone who is going around and knifing guys that he's picking up at bars. And he keeps saying, "You made me do this," and he stabs him. So Al decides to move into this neighborhood, and he winds up getting to know the guys. He goes to the clubs. He learns about what all different colored hankies mean, which is a great speech from Powers Booth of all people. And he also lives next to Don Scardino from He Knows You're Alone, who went on to work on tons of TV shows. And Karen Allen from Raiders of the Lost Ark, right before she was in that, plays his girlfriend. Really insane cast. You've got like, James Remar. I mean, all these character actors pop up through the whole movie. But it's a bizarre movie. And the fact that they don't really solve the mystery, I think, is what upsets a lot of people. But I love it because it's a movie that leaves you feeling super queasy at the end. And it's not really a spoiler because there's nothing to really spoil because you see the killer's face, but you're never quite sure who it is. And even when you think you've got the killer, you're like, but that. So really, really creepy movie. Wonderful soundtrack. You got bands like the Germs, for example, just a really, really fantastic soundtrack. Really, really, really like this film. But it's been embraced since then. I mean, a lot of I know tons and tons of like gay viewers love this movie now because again, it's really fun in just a really trashy way. It's like an American Giallo. If you watch it that way, it's I think the best way to watch it because you don't watch a Giallo, you don't watch something like Case of the Bloody Iris or whatever, expecting incisive social commentary or an accurate depiction of like single women living in Italy. That's ridiculous. So Cruisin is kind of like that. It's way over the top, really ridiculous. There's a scene involving the cops keeping a beefy guy in a jockstrap in the closet to beat up suspects. I mean, stuff like that. It's just nuts. But yeah. So
sorry, Video Store Review says there was quite a bit of backlash from the gay community, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
tons. Yeah. At the time, again, this was like before AIDS hit, and it was like way after Stonewall, but before AIDS. So there was kind of a lot of touchiness on the subject because the gay rights movement was really big, and people had just heard they were making the movie, and so they would bring like whistles and stuff during the shooting to try to disrupt it. And so that's why a lot of the movies, like ADR, they had to dub in dialogue later to cover it because there was so much noise going on. And also there was another movie that came out almost at the same time called Windows, which was kind of like the lesbian version of this, which is where Talia Shire is getting stalked, by a psychotic lesbian stalker. It's kind of like Play Miss Deformity, but with women. So yeah, it was a really big thing at the time. It's kind of like Basic Instinct, which again, people were up in arms and protesting at the time. And now everybody loves it because they realize it's just this crazy, trashy, fun movie. You can't take it seriously at all.
Right. I've never seen Cruisin. It's been on my list forever, and I just never got around to it.
It's something else.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to move it up. It's just one of those like, oh right, I still haven't seen Cruisin. I'll have to get to it. Yeah. Okay. Our next film. When you put this on the list, I'm like, oh, okay.
Here we go.
Let's go to number 2.
So number 2, again, and this is a movie that I still have mixed feelings about, but it's one that I think needs to be talked about because I was really apprehensive about watching it because it had such a fierce reputation before it came out, and it built up this kind of mystique. I think it still does, and a lot of people who condemn this film actually haven't seen it. But I think it's an important one because it came at a very interesting time period, and that is a Serbian film from 2010. And if you hate this film, you think it's reprehensible, I get it. Again, but it's actually a well-made film, and it's doing some interesting things. When you watch a movie for sleaze value, this one ups the ante. This is kind of like someone taking like what's a grosser than gross joke, or like literally like what's we do with a dumpster full of dead babies joke, and taking it as far as you can go. Now, there's a really infamous scene in this that got cut out from most of the countries where it came out, which is not real, by the way. You don't even see it; it's all implied. But in fact, the movie's not really as graphic as it sounds. When you read the synopsis, you're like, "Geez, that sounds like the sickest movie ever made." But they actually don't. It's really not. And the thing is, it's also a really dark comedy. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it too much, but the climax, it's about this guy he used to be a big porn star, but he's married, he has a wife and a kid, and he gets roped into sort of making a comeback in this film. It turns out it's this crime ring, and they make snuff films. And but it's kind of odd because compared to what we know now about stuff like Jeffrey Epstein and all that, it actually feels almost tame. In kind of a sick way, because you realize it's all fictional. It's kind of done as like this sort of ridiculous crime movie kind of thing. And you're like, but what's going on in real life is so much ickier. But I mean, the climax involves the guy piercing someone's skull with his moneymaker. So, I mean, it's stuff like that where you're like, it's almost like a trauma film. And it's like, if you watch it in that way, it's like, it's really fascinating. But again, it's kind of an art film in a way, and has a great soundtrack, and the acting is really good. So I don't know, there's nothing else quite like it. And if you never want to see it, I totally get it. But it's a movie that you should be aware of. And I think that it at least deserves part of that conversation. And it's also part of that. There's this outrage cinema thing going on about 10 years ago with like Human Centipede and Martyrs and Life and Death of a Porno Gang. And again, I think this one is kind of the most interesting of that batch. I can't say that it's a film that I love. It's depressing. It's weird. Also, the ending is almost the same one as Kill List, which I think is kind of a bizarre coincidence. I'm not sure how that happened, but yeah. So Serbian film is my number 2 for better or worse.
Serbian film, man. I've never seen it, to be honest. Mike says he's only seen it once. It didn't do much for him. Yeah, to me, I fall into that group of people that like, I heard what it's about. I heard what happens in it. I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm a dad, and it just feels like it's too creepy to watch that. I don't know, but you think it's a movie that deserves more of a conversation?
Yeah. I think the fact that it exists, and again, the fact that that movie, I think, has gotten so, again, it's one of the most widely banned films. That and like Ken Russell's The Devils are probably like the 2 most battered up movies, I think, in history. But again, compared to something that like, again, Melancholy the Angels is one that I mentioned, where someone really did do some atrocious stuff for real in front of a camera. Wow. That bothers me way more. Like when you're dealing in pure fantasy, it's all simulated. I can deal with that. It's when you cross that line over the real stuff, that's where I'm like, no.
Right. Like the Rene Cardona movies.
Yeah. Yeah, when I had to review that set, and I was just like, they're really fun, except when they start like beating up and killing the sharks for real, because then that kind of ruins it. It's like
right, headless parrots. I mean, geez. Yeah. Okay, number 3.
Okay, so for something lighter, Of course, this would not be complete without a little bit of Jess Franco, who is a guy that everyone used to sort of rag on all the time. Now he's like one of the biggest cult directors around. I think it's kind of hilarious that now in our modern sort of Blu-ray 4K era, that among like cult genre circles, like he and Lucio Fulci are like the two most popular guys. They've actually like eclipsed like Argento and Bava. I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. So cool. But Jess Franco, it's odd because like when he started off his career, he wasn't really that sleazy, at least until like kind of the late 60s. You know, even stuff like Diabolical Dr. Z and all that, they're kind of these fun, pulpy, but kind of arty films. Mm-hmm. And then he did this movie called 99 Women, and it's like a flip switch. Switch got flipped at him. And it was a very early X rating. It's kind of a soft R by now, but that was one of the very first modern women in prison films. So he kind of on and off kept making women in prison movies for the next 10 years or so. Now, the one that I picked is a movie that has a bunch of different titles. We're going to call it One of the Wicked Warden, or Greta the Mad Butcher, or Ilsa the Wicked Warden, or Ilsa Absolute Power, whatever you want to call it. But it's from 1977. It's kind of close to the end of that cycle. But the reason why this one is so special, because you've got Jess Franco, you've got Diane Thorne, who of course was the star of Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, and 2 legit sequels. This is not a sequel. She's playing a totally different character, but then in some prints they looped it so that she suddenly becomes Ilsa, or she's Greta, or she's Wanda, whatever. But she's not Ilsa from the other movies at all. There's no Nazism, there's no sheiks, there's none of that stuff. This is just a pure women in prison movie. You've also got Lena Romay, who was Jess Franco's muse, essentially from the early 70s onward. They wound up becoming, life companions, husband, wife. But she really brought out that extra something special in Jess, and he for her. There's kind of a symbiotic thing. But Lena Romay, when she works with Franco, there's nothing else like it when she's on fire, and she really is in this film. She has a great character where she's kind of this masochistic, second in command, sadist lover. It's a really cool character that she plays. And this was also done with a Swiss producer named Erwin C. Dietrich, who is kind of the sleaze maven of Switzerland and Germany in that era. He turned out a lot of Jess Franco films in that period. They did like 17 movies, I think. He also made a insane movie called Mad Foxes, which would be on my honorable mention list in there, which is one of the most insane movies I've ever seen in my life. But you've got these 4 people all together in one movie. And I mean, the plot doesn't really matter. All of his women in prison movies are pretty much the same story. It's about a girl going undercover to find out what happened to her sister. Diane Thorne is the Wicked Warden. There's lots of showering. There's a scene with like human pin cushioning. There's a scene involving toilet hygiene that's really disgusting. It's really filthy, but but it again, it's just that kind of that drive-in exploitation kind of way you can only get in the 70s. And of course it takes place in this Banana Republic, setting, so you get lots of running through the jungle and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a special one. But if you like this one, I'd also say check out things like Barbed Wire Dolls. That's another really foul one that Jess Franco did. But yeah, as far as when prison movies go, those are already super sleazy, but Jess, I think it took it to that extra level. I think he's the king.
A quick aside here, since we're talking about Jess Franco, do you have, and again, off the top of your head, like a top 5 Jess Franco must-watch movies? Sure.
The Virgin Among the Living Dead is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Venus in Furs. Just for sheer entertainment value, I would say Bloody Moon, which is like one of the funniest slasher movies ever made. It is. That is a movie you can just grab some beers and just like watch it with. You have to watch it with friends though. You have to like interact with it. Bloody Moon is just so much fun. It's insane. Lorna the Exorcist, I think, which is probably the best Lena Romay performance. She is just absolutely out of control in it. She's terrifying in it, actually. Really great one. For number 5, probably one called The Other Side of the Mirror, which is a really creepy one. It hasn't gotten a legit release in the US yet. I pray to God that it will, but it's a really cool kind of horror movie that he made in the 70s. So fingers crossed we'll get that one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I never heard of that one.
It's a good one.
I'm not a big Jess guy, but we had Tim Lucas on, and he sort of changed my mind about rediscovering Jess. Yeah. So I'm excited.
You gotta be careful, because if you enter it from the wrong movies, you won't get anywhere. It's like you've got to kind of plan it carefully and kind of work your way in slowly, or else you'll be like, oh, I hate this crap, I can't watch it.
That's probably what happened, because I have seen 99 Women and Virgin Among the Living Dead, and so Dr. Z, right? Dr. Z, yeah. Those kind of things. So it's been very scattershot. So I think maybe I need more of a plan.
Yeah. At a minimum, I think Bloody Moon though is one anybody can watch and enjoy though.
That was fun. I enjoyed that one, but it felt very different for him. It didn't really feel like a Jess Franco movie.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I liked it. I don't know. Okay, number 4.
Number 4. So And now when I'm talking about sleazy movies, sometimes it doesn't have to have any actual gore or nudity in it. Sometimes it's just the vibe that you have. And this movie has one of the sleaziest atmospheres of any movie I've ever seen. And this is Who Killed Teddy Bear from 1965, which is one of the grungiest New York City movies, I should say, ever. There's a lot of New York City movies on this list. Again, it's the Big Apple brings out the worst in people, I think, but as does Cruisin, for example. But this was made by Sal Mineo, who at the time, I mean, he was like the Rebel Without a Cause guy. He was kind of the, the loner puppy dog that everybody wanted to take home and feel sorry for. And Sal Mineo was like, I'm not having any of that. So he made some really interesting choices. And in this one, he plays this guy named Lawrence. He's like this busboy at a nightclub. And when he goes home at night, he decides that he's just covered in sweat. So he's going to get in his undies and make dirty phone calls to people that he's obsessed with. And he gets fixated on this DJ at the club, played by Juliet Prowse. And he starts like leading around all these like decapitated teddy bears. And then Juliet's dealing with, she has this like super butch boss played by Elaine Stritch, who's like one of the biggest Broadway legends. So this is kind of like this is like a Broadway show, like just on crack or something. It's really strange. But this was written by Arnold Drake, who is one of the guys who created Guardians of the Galaxy. So of course you should watch Guardians right after this. Great double feature. It was directed by Joseph Cates, who was Phoebe Cates' dad. And you have this like crazy character cast. You got Daniel J. Travanti from Hill Street Blues pops up. You got Bruce Glover, who was in Diamonds Are Forever after this. That's Crispin's dad. But it's just so sweaty and scuzzy and sleazy. I don't know why this hasn't been put out on video in the US. It was picked up by this company called Strand like years ago, and they did kind of like a little theatrical run, but you can get it on Blu-ray in the UK. But for some reason, they're sitting on it here, which sucks. So if you are into importing stuff, go to Amazon UK or Diabolic or wherever and pick up the Blu-ray, because it's a really fun one and super sleazy.
Oh man, I again, this is one I did not know, and now I'm definitely going to grab this. Sal Mineo, love him, says Video Store Review. He also says you've 100% sold me. That's the plan. Make sure you guys are taking notes, because
I apologize to your wallets, folks. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. We're used to that. If you have any questions for Nathaniel, go ahead and send them in. After every 5 titles on the list, we'll do like a question and answer section. Okay, number 5.
Okay, number 5. This is probably the most obscure movie on this list, but it's one that I try to champion whenever I can. This is one that's called The Obsessed One from 1974. This is pretty much the only like significantly distributed exploitation movie that came out from Suriname, which is a little country that was originally established by Holland. It's next to Guyana in South America, but they had their own little film industry, and this movie is really, really nuts. They tried to sell it as a horror film, as you can see here. This was released by 21st Century, which was Sam Sherman's company. He's the guy who brought you all his Al Adamson movies, for example. But he would pick up these kind of oddball movies, and this was one. It never really took off because I think he couldn't figure out how to promote it. But it's kind of a bunch of different sleaze movies in one. It's kind of a rape revenge film. It's like an occult film. It's an action film. A little bit of everything. It's about this guy named Tyrone, and he's been set up for the murder of his wife because these 3 delinquents were sitting around. They were playing this game late at night, doing hash or something. This card game where like this has like sex and blood written on the cards, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna get some blood tonight." So they go out and go after his wife, and so he decides he's gonna get even. And it starts off kind of like weird, but pretty sedate. There's like a little love montage. It's like a shampoo commercial. So you kind of got to bear with it a little bit for the first half hour. But then once the revenge kicks in, it's such a blast. It has this incredible like chase scene through a parking lot with this camera work that I can't believe they pulled off on a budget of like $10. But it's, if you love like Sam Raimi type shots, these guys were doing it in like the mid 70s. It's really nuts. And it gets super trashy. There's like a guy getting trussed up in a shower and getting castrated and all kinds of just really nutty stuff going on in it. You get these like sex scenes with like crazy overdubbing with people going, ah! And there's just a great pimp in it named Sugarcane. He comes with his own little funk theme every time he walks in. He's, of course, carrying a big cane. Super, super fun movie. I wish more people knew about it. It was released on Blu-ray very briefly by Code Red back in 2015. I don't think you can get it now, although their stuff is coming out now like for general retail, because you used to have to buy it straight from them, and it was a real pain in the butt. So I hope that maybe through Kino or somebody will get it, because I think they still have the rights to it. But if not, you can get on eBay for like $20 or whatever. But highly recommend it if you haven't heard of this one.
I'm going to show the poster real quick. There's an actress named Sally Savalas. Any connection to Telly? No? Oh,
no,
wow.
I wish, unfortunately.
How crazy would that be? Just like his daughter or his sister or whatever. That's kind of nuts.
I wish it was a bald actor sucking a lollipop, but no such luck.
Oh well. GK Fan 69, which is a great name. I really appreciate that Mondo Digital with the reviews always break down the history of physical releases for the film. Yeah, that's got to be difficult to do, though, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I kind of keep doing the site, because it's a history that kind of gets lost because nobody really writes books about this stuff. It's not being chronicled anywhere. So I think it's important that, that it keeps getting put in context. Like when people say, oh, well, this looks like crap. And I'm like, well, but this was shot on 16. The negative's gone. Like, look at how it used to look on DVD. I mean, you've got to keep this stuff in context. Not everything's going to look like, the Goonies. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's the problem with restoration nowadays. A lot of the movies that we want to see have not been well taken care of, and that is the unfortunate truth.
Yeah, like a good example real quick, because Troy was on here talking about it, but I just wanted to point out, like, for example, Severin put out that Lindsay set and had Orgasmo and Paranoia, the two cuts, and that movie has always looked like crap on video. So I know people were, when they first saw the Blu-ray, they were like, what? It doesn't look pristine. It still looks 9,000 times better than we've ever had it. I was just like, thank God. I mean, at least I can see the whole image and it's got color and like you can tell what you're looking at, So again, it's all about context.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, if we want to watch these movies, this is the best we're going to get. And we should be grateful for that, because they'd be lost to time, basically. And now, funny enough, I had a question for you for physical media releases. You do a lot of commentaries. What's your preparation like for that?
Well, it depends on the movie, because I mean, some of them, like, for example, I did a commentary for Opera, the Argento one, and like, I didn't need to do any research. I'd spent my, since it came out, I spent years living that, having that movie like internalized. So it's like, I sat down, I just did that thing off the top of my head. I didn't even have to take notes. Other movies, like, I like to do research. So sometimes, unfortunately, it sucks still having COVID around, because I can't do a lot of legwork. Like, I'll try to go to the Academy Library, things like that, because they have all the studio paperwork. So you can read all the executive notes and stuff like that and do research, which on Universal movies, it's important because, it's interesting seeing how movies got changed and that kind of stuff. So yeah, sometimes I'll spend hours, days, sometimes weeks, doing prep work. Other times it's a movie that I already know backwards and forwards. So, it kind of depends. And if I've got somebody like Troy along, or Howard Berger, Steve Mitchell, somebody like that, then we sort of commiserate a little bit, figure out who's going to talk about what, and, off to the races.
Right. And have you ever, this probably has never happened, but have you ever researched a movie, that you liked, and then, or maybe vice versa, you researched a movie that you didn't really like, but you ended up liking it, or vice versa, you researched a movie you liked and ended up walking away going, it's tainted somehow for me?
The only example I can think of offhand, it's actually one of the, I shouldn't say this. It's one of the few comedies I've done that I didn't really like, because by the time I started doing it, I was just like, actually, I don't like this movie that much anymore. It's a Canadian thriller called Stone Cold Dead from the late 70s, which I loved. It was on cable, and I got all psyched to do it, and I was doing it with Howard, and then the movie was kicking in. I was doing the research on all that, and I was just like, this actually isn't as interesting as I thought it was. And so you can kind of tell when you hear it, you can sort of feel me sort of deflating as it goes along. I mean, that's pretty rare. And we've all done, all of us who do these commentaries, like, we all have like a couple where we're just like, in retrospect, it's like, maybe I probably shouldn't have done that one, but it's simply a good idea at the time.
Yeah. Stone Cold Dead, Aquino put that out, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I just bought that. So I'm gonna listen to that.
It's not a terrible movie, but I was just watching. I was just like, I don't know if this is really needed a whole commentary's worth. It really didn't merit it.
I understand. Okay. Moving on to number 6.
Okay. Number 6. This is the only like major studio film on the list, and the only one on this list that is actually part of the Criterion Collection. Although they do have their sleaze cred. They've done John Waters movies. They've done Sallow, Sweet movies, stuff like that. But this is one of my very favorite movies of all time, and that is Beyond the Valley of the Dolls from 1970, the Russ Meyer classic, and one of the only 2 films that he made for 20th Century Fox. It was this film in the 7 minutes. This movie is just amazing. If you haven't seen it, please get on it right away. When they were making this film, they had some trouble because Jacqueline Suzanne, the author of the original Valley of the Dolls, which is a much more traditional kind of semi-trashy soap opera about 3 women trying to make it in the entertainment biz, she got all ticked off because she had pitched her own sequel and Fox didn't take it. And so they had to put this disclaimer saying, this is not a sequel. There's never been anything like it. It's like, well, those statements are both very true. It is not a sequel, and there has still never been any movie like this, although Austin Powers quoted it, and they tried in the opening of that one. So I don't even know how to describe this one, except it is the most 1970 movie ever made. It takes place in Hollywood. It's about these 3 young women who have decided they've had enough of doing, they have their own band, they've done these high school gigs, and they decide to hoof it over in their van to LA because one of them has a rich aunt who can help them get along, and they start this band called the Carrie Nations, and they have this like crazy producer called Z-Man, and it's all about this whirlwind world of entertainment at the time with like drugs and sex and violence and all that. And then in the last half hour, it turns into this kind of like Charles Manson massacre movie. I don't want to say more than that, but this movie shifts gears so many times. It's a musical, it's a dark comedy, it's a horror movie. It has plot twists galore. I can't even describe what happens in the last 20 minutes of this movie. It's just astonishing. But again, it's very Russ Meyer. The editing in this, it's just a textbook on how to just, if you want to just snappy editing, it is just down to the frame. It's just an absolutely spectacular film, but very sleazy. It was written by Roger Ebert. Yes, that Roger Ebert. Yep. One of two films that he wrote for Russ. He also wrote Russ's last film under a different name, was Beneath the Valley of the Ultra Vixens, which is more of a straight up comedy. And to this day, I'm still not sure Russ or Roger quite knew where they were coming from with this movie, because it has this narration kind of running through it about, about some of the characters being punished or deserving what they got and all this stuff. And you can't quite tell when the movie's putting you on and when it's being serious, which is kind of the charm of it. But whatever it is, again, whatever that magic potion was that they put this movie together, it's really something else. And again, if you can't watch it with multiple people, try to see it in a theater whenever we open up for that again. Because if you see it with a crowd, it's an experience like nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a wild one. I mean, I picked this up. I'm familiar with Russ, and I watched a lot of his stuff. And then I heard that Roger Ebert had written a movie. I'm like, oh, what is it? Oh, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And then I watched it, and it is such a. You're right. It's indescribable. It's such a unique experience, for better or worse. This is gonna have turn off a lot of people, but it's a wild movie. Of course, written by one of the great perverts of the time, Roger Ebert, who was he himself admits he's a big boob fan. So that's where he and Russ had a meeting of the minds. I got
to add that Roger Ebert's proclivities for the fairer sex are the reason that we wound up having disclaimers on DVDs and Blu-rays about this commentary does not represent the opinions of the studio, because Russ Meyer did commentaries for 3 of his movies back on Laserdisc, and the one he did for Ultra Vixens, the stuff that he says about Roger Ebert in that is so outrageous. I can't even repeat it all right now, but because of that commentary, that's why they had to start adding legal disclaimers onto commentaries, because of the Roger Ebert stuff in that.
No shit, I had no idea. Holy crap!
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not monetized here, so you feel free to curse. Tell us a couple of the tidbits as to what he said.
Well, so in the movie, there's an actress. There's this very Zoftig black actress who plays a character named Junkyard Sal, and Russ talks about how he basically applied Roger Ebert with lots of super busty black women to keep him happy, and about what Roger Ebert liked to do in bed with him, and how he knew what Roger's kinks were and that kind of thing. I won't go into super explicit detail, but in the commentary, if you ever hear it, I think it's on the Arrow DVD out in the UK. But yeah, it's nuts. And by the way, I'm Beyond the Valley of Dolls. Also, this movie is still so nuts. It still can't get an R rating. Like even when they put the Blu-ray, it still is rated NC-17.
Oh wow.
Yeah, mainly because of a scene involving a gun and Erica Gavin. Apparently, that's a big no-no with the MPA. Even to this day, you can't do that. But I do think it's weird that Roger Ebert kind of got on a soapbox when slasher movies came around, because he was, aside from Halloween, he was very against them. And you notice, like, one of the movies that he hated the most was The Hitcher, which he rather infamously, he and Siskel were like, they were after that movie for like a year, constantly. But if you watch this movie, it's like there's stuff in here that's worse than The Hitcher. I mean, it's a pretty rough movie once the shit hits the fan. Like it's like, geez, Roger, really? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's very different, when it comes to critiquing and making a movie. And I think Roger forgot.
I think so.
Himself a little bit anyway.
Yeah.
Mike says, I seen Beyond the Valley of Dolls on TV about 15 years ago. Great film. Need to rewatch it. You can grab it now. It's 50% off Barnes & Noble's through Criterion for the next week. So
that's right.
If you guys don't have it, go out and grab it and support Barnes & Noble's and Criterion. Next.
So obviously, this list will not be complete without some Category 3 action. If you don't know what Category 3 is, that is the Hong Kong classification. It's kind of like their version of the X rating. I'm not talking about hardcore X. I'm talking about like adults only. And Category 3 movies are kind of their own thing. Honestly, this list could just be all Category 3 films because there's so many to choose from, but they are super, super sleazy, really crazy stuff. I mean, things like Sex and Zen, if you've ever seen that one, you kind of know what to expect. The one that I picked is one that's called 3 Days of a Blind Girl from 1993. And this is kind of like the Category 3 version of Wait Until Dark. It's nuts. It has one of the great Category 3 actors, who's Anthony Wong, who starred in a movie called The Untold Story, which is one of the great Hong Kong cannibalism horror movies. Also kind of a dark comedy in a way, based on a real criminal atrocity that was committed. If you haven't, there's a new Blu-ray out of that one. I'd recommend checking it out. This one hasn't come out in the US legit ever, I don't think, although it is out on Hong Kong Blu-ray with subtitles. So go to your favorite importer and try to get your hands on it. This movie is really, really something. It is about this young married woman played by Veronica Yip, and she has just had surgery, and she's going to lose her sight for 3 days. And rather inconveniently, her husband has to go out of town. And Anthony Wong is the psychopath who blames her husband for wronging him. And so he decides that he's going to get even by sneaking into the house and basically tormenting her. And then things get really strange. It's Anthony Wong is totally unhinged in this. There's a scene where she's taking a shower and he doesn't want her to know that he's in the shower with her. It's a scene that like goes on for like 5 minutes. And I don't know how they filmed it without just cracking up, because it's so nuts and so over the top. It's very politically incorrect. I think a label, maybe Unearthed or somebody, might pick it up at some point and put it out if they have the guts. It doesn't ever cross any like lines that I think are super indefensible, but it's just so trashy and sleazy. But I love Category 3 films. If you ever get someone like Bruce Holochek on here someday, maybe he can give you guys some more pointers on them, because there's so many. I mean, they're getting like the Blu-ray treatment now, like stuff like Erotic Ghost Story just got a deluxe Blu-ray release in the UK, for God's sake. So very strange, magical times we live in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know much about Category 3 films. I'm familiar with them, but I might have seen stuff and not been aware that they were Category 3. But this one sounds really interesting. I could see what the sleaze would be in that film. Oh man.
Yeah, it kind of plays like a '90s erotic thriller, but like turned up to like triple the volume. It's sort of like that.
Gotcha. Oh gosh. Okay. There you go. What's number 7?
Alrighty. So I think number 8.
No, I'm 6, 7, 8. Yes.
8, right. So this is a movie that was not Category 3 when it came out, but it wound up getting slapped with that rating kind of retroactively later on when it hit video and when it got theatrically shown again later on. And this is one called Seeding of a Ghost, and this is from Shaw Brothers. And most people know them for all of their amazing kung fu films. There was Extreme of Shaolin, Five Deadly Venoms, that kind of stuff. But man, they could get super trashy when they wanted to. I don't know where some of their ideas came from, but my God, they made some really crazy stuff. Probably the most famous horror films they made were the Black Magic films, which were pretty successful. But this one's on a whole other level. This one came out in '83, and it is very gory and really perverse. It's kind of a supernatural revenge film about this cab driver, and this is a recurring theme. Again, his wife gets assaulted and killed. A lot of these movies do that for some reason. So he decides he's going to resort to black magic to get even. So he goes to the sorcerer, who comes up with this plan. It involves like horny, like reanimated corpses and people blowing up and like worms and all kinds of stuff. And it's basically just this big gross out movie. Again, it starts off kind of sedate for the first 30 minutes. You think, oh, I know where this is going. And then it just goes like off the charts crazy. But again, Shaw Brothers, I think they're way more perverse and sleazy than people tend to realize that they are. They've made some really wild ones. There's dated one called Boxer's Omen, for example, that's kind of like this one, where it's just super stylish. I mean, like just wild colors and just the visual, the practical effects are just really, really crazy. Just like bodies levitating and just, again, people's like, internal organs flying around. Really, really fun one. Again, this is out on British Blu-ray. Again, in the US, we're still deprived, but again, you can probably get it for like $15 or so if you look around. But yeah, Seeding of a Ghost is, it's a party movie.
I'm familiar with this movie. I have not seen it, but it's again like Cruisin. It's been on my list for a while, and now I've got to make stronger efforts to find it. I mean, I'm familiar with like Oily Maniac and Boxer's Omen and stuff like that.
Yeah, like Killer Snakes came out over here. There's a few that got released here. I should add that I had nothing to do with this one. Back in the day, before I was doing what I do now, I worked at Image Entertainment for about 10 years. I was like the brand manager for things like all the Shaw Brothers line that we did, and like the Something Weird line and Euroshock and like all the Teddy Michaels films. So I also did like the Caligula special edition that took a year to put together. So Caligula I did not put on this list, by the way, because if I start talking about it, that'll take 2 hours and it'll kill the rest of the show. So yeah. Gotcha.
All right, moving on.
Okay. So number 9, a better known film, I think, probably to most of our listeners. This is Beyond the Darkness from 1979. This is a very special film to me because as a kid, I kind of grew up when the video store was king, and they really didn't give a crap what your age was. You could walk in, as long as you had a video card, you could watch whatever you wanted, basically. As long as it wasn't porn. You couldn't go in the back room for obvious reasons, but you could pretty much rummage the horror section to your heart's desire, which, considering that I was way too young to go see an R-rated movie, but I could rent stuff like Reanimator, a little bit of a disconnect there, but,
Yeah.
But again, it was a special way to grow up because I love this stuff. So, there I am at 11 years old running Gates of Hell and stuff like that. This one always piqued my interest because, like I said, I was reading stuff like, Fangoria and all that, and they would mention films that you couldn't just find like a Blockbuster. You had to kind of dig. You have to go to a mom and pop store and do a little bit of legwork to find these. And this was one of those movies. It was put out by Thriller Video, and this was one of only 2 films, I think it's only maybe 2 or 3 movies, that Elvira did not host. There were some movies that were too much for her to deal with. Make Them Die Slowly was probably the big one where she was like, I'm not touching that one. And this one she wouldn't do either. This one I think is a little more palatable, even though it's a really sick, crazy, offensive movie. But it was released as Buried Alive at the time. And so, of course, I had to see this movie because it sounded really nuts. And it is. This was directed by Joe D'Amato, who, for the record, is the only director who appears on this list twice. Because I think he is probably the Sultan of Sleaze as far as movies go. I love Joe D'Amato to death. He just brings that extra something super special to his movies until he turned to doing hardcore porn, which is depressing. That stuff is just blech. But before he went to like the shot on video junk, he really was something else. I don't think he gets the credit for what he brought to our special Italian cult movies, but I really love him. But this is one of his masterpieces. It's about this. It's actually a remake of kind of a sort of a giallo kind of from the 60s called The Third Eye with Franco Nero. But this one just, again, it just super sleazes the story up. It's about this young guy named Frank, who's played by this guy named Kieran Cantor, who did a few movies around that time, and then he became a bus driver in Italy, I think, and then he moved to the U.S. It's weird. No one's been able to find him for an interview. I'd love to know what happened to this guy, but he's so heartbroken about the death of his girlfriend, who's played by Cinzia Monreale, who plays the blind girl in Lucio Fulci's The Beyond, among many other movies. So he copes with it by stealing her body and preserving it and keeping it in his bedroom, and he winds up killing other people who find out about it, and he gets mothered by his weird ass housekeeper who kind of mothers him, and it's really weird. It's kind of like a burial ground kind of thing at times. It's really strange. But he'll grind people up into mush when he can't get rid of the bodies, and he pulls off fingernails and stuff. And it has a score by Goblin of all people. This is right after he did Deep Red and Suspiria, and so they're like, yeah, let's do Beyond the Darkness. Like, sure. This was right after if you know about Goblin, their history is kind of strange. It's kind of like a revolving door of people in the band. And right now they're like 2 different Goblins for that reason. They're like different rival Goblin bands because Claudio Simonetti split off. But this was the first time he left the band. So you don't have that Claudio Simonetti keyboard sound in this one. So it's kind of that more pure proggy electronic Goblin sound, but it's a great score. I really love it. I've never heard them perform anything from it live. Unfortunately, I wish they would just do one of those things where they show the movie, like they do Suspiria, where they'll show the movie and do a live accompaniment. I wish they would do Beyond the Darkness just to watch people freak the hell out and run out of the theater. It'd be great. That probably won't happen. But anyway, Beyond the Darkness is great. Severin did a really great special edition a couple of years ago, I think. So if you want to see it, that's the best way.
Yeah, Severin seems to always know what to put out that it kind of fits that real sleaze button, that kind of special, that special little extra. They always seem to know where to find those movies, and God love them for it. But geez, this is a movie that is very much a one you have to prepare yourself for. It's not an easy one to just jump into.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, a sleazy movie, it always has to feel just a little bit dangerous. And this movie, the first time I saw it on video, it felt really dangerous. I felt really just unclean watching it. Yeah, which, that's the tell for you're this is really sleazy. Where you just feel I don't want anyone else to know that I'm watching this movie. It's kind of like when I saw Jess Franco's Female Vampire the first time. Again, because I was a kid and I just found the tape and I was just I probably should not be watching this movie. There's something wrong with this movie. Not for your demographic exactly.
All right, number 10.
All right, so number 10, again, probably the most famous film on this list, or one of the most famous movies on this list. I hope you've all seen this one, and this is Pieces from 1982. This is the masterpiece from Juan Piqué Simón, or J.P. Simon, whatever you want to call him. And this movie is just astonishing. One of the most quotable films ever made. It is a slasher movie from Spain with the team of Christopher George and Linda Day George. I think it was in their contract, like half their projects every year they had to do together, even if it was on TV. This is like nothing else they ever did. This is, I don't even know how to describe this one. So this is about a college campus where someone's running amok, mainly with a chainsaw, hacking up co-eds. And our hero is this really strange guy who goes around sleeping with everyone. And so he winds up teaming up with Linda Day George, who's a cop who's brought in to go undercover and is a tennis player. And then like they kind of seem like they might sleep together, but then they're not. And you got Edmund Purdom, who's the guy who brought you like Don't Open Till Christmas and all these other sleazy movies. He plays the dean. You've got Jack Taylor from all the Jess Franco movies. He plays a teacher. He has some amazing dialogue in this. If his reactions to every time they find a dead body, it's insane. You have this great like pilfered soundtrack where they raided the library of other trash movies like Joe D'Amato's Absurd. There's a lot of tracks from that, for example. Crazy entertaining. I think it's one of the most entertaining Euro horror movies ever made. It is just like one nugget after another. It's just pure joy from start to finish. Has actually, like Beyond the Darkness, it has one of the great like what the fuck endings. Like in the last 20 seconds, it just suddenly throws something at you, and you're like, sure, okay, I guess that happened. Yeah, Pieces is just it's a 5-star film all the way for me.
Yeah, Pieces is I mean, it's memorable. I mean, you got Kendall. Kendall's the name of our hero. I mean,
Kendall, back to bed.
And what's oh man, I forget who it's the girl who does it. She goes like that bastards.
Yeah. Bastard.
Oh, I mean, well, I wonder if that was like a bet. Like, how stupid can you say this?
Right.
I mean,
I'm sure what happened was JP was behind the camera. He's like, "Okay, Linda, one more take. Do it one more time. One more time. One more time." And like, I think they just forgot to cut it. So it's like every take, it just keeps going and going and going.
You know what? Yeah, that feels right. They just
one more time with feeling like.
I mean, you watch that, you're like, wait, is this a comedy? I mean, things all of a sudden things change. Like, wait a minute, I think I was approaching this movie very differently.
Yeah, it is a really hilarious film.
It's I mean, I'm sure you guys have all seen Pieces, but if you haven't, Pieces is a fun time. And make sure if it's a first date, you got to show Pieces. Mm-hmm. You know, you set the stage. You're like, this is my favorite movie, and then you show Pieces, and then you see where you stand.
I would have respect for someone who took me on a first date and the movie was Pieces. I can't think of a good choice.
That's pretty great, right? All right, we're at halfway point on the list. Quick pause, real quick for tomorrow. Let's watch live 3 p.m. PST here. We're watching Psycho Cop.
Woo.
I've never seen it, and I own part 2 thanks to Vinegar Syndrome. So I said, well, let me find Psycho Cop. It's here on YouTube. It's free to watch, so I grabbed it. And we're watching it tomorrow live at 3 p.m. PST and 5 p.m. Yeah, 5 p.m. EST. Mm-hmm. So make sure you tune in if you're interested in some psycho action. I hope it's good, but I honestly can't guarantee it will be. But we'll be here chatting live. It'll be fun. It'll be a party. Video Store Review says, I haven't seen Pieces, but it's in the basket. Keep them coming. Oh, man. You're gonna love that movie. You are gonna love it. Oh. If
you don't like Pieces, I will personally refund your money for it. I am so confident.
There you go. There you go. Moonchild71 says, Life and Death of a Porno Gang. Cool movie. I've never seen it. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's, again, like I said, that's kind of like the slightly more socially acceptable alternative to Serbian film that came out the same year. Synapse actually put this one out. Yeah, it's really good. It's really, really well made. But the plots are kind of sort of similar. But yeah, it's a good one. But again, I would not respect somebody who showed that to me on a first date, though.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Orlando says, Psycho Cop, cool. I've never seen that movie. Awesome. That'll make 2 of us. I hope to see you there, Orlando. Okay. I'll find myself here. Okay, let's go with 11.
11, yeah. So this is a movie that I had never even heard of until 2018. This was part of a batch of movies that's still kind of continuing, actually. As you know, Synapse Films has kind of this offshoot called Impulse Pictures, and they've been doing a lot of mainly what were known as the pink films that Nikatsu put out. And these are basically really outrageous sex films. They're all softcore, completely softcore, but they kind of are different genres. Some are kind of horror films, some are comedies, and some are just kind of general exploitation. This is one of the women in prison movies that Nikatsu made, and there's a whole string of them. They did a whole bunch of these. But this is one that was totally off my radar until the DVD came out. And this is from 1977, and it's called Female Prisoner 101 Suck. What a title.
Yeah.
So I had no clue what I was getting into with this one, and it takes a lot to leave me speechless. And this movie had my jaw not just on the floor, it was like dragging like behind me when I tried to stand up. This movie is really something. It's about a woman who is prisoner 101, obviously. She used to be this hooker, and she was dating this guy. He was kind of a rising pop singer in Japan. But one of his colleagues essentially tries to rape her, and she winds up killing him. She gets thrown in jail for it. And it's all about her experiences in jail and all the atrocities in there. And then it takes this twist in the last 15 minutes. It is one of the most shocking endings I've ever seen in my life. I can't begin to spoil this movie, but it did not go where I thought it was heading at all. It's actually kind of haunting. It's a really terrifying ending. Not where you would think a women in prison movie would go at the end, but it is, wow. Not the best looking DVD they put out. I think the only thing they had was like an older master, but just having this thing at all was just, wow, just God bless Impulse for putting this out. It might be my favorite thing they've ever released. And they've done a ton of these movies. The director is a guy named Koyu Ohara, and he is no stranger to this kind of stuff. He directed Fairy in a Cage, which is one of the very few Nikatsus they've done on Blu-ray, which is a really good one, but it's kind of a little more slick, a little more respectable, but that's a really good one. He also directed what would have been my second runner-up choice on this list, which is one called White Rose Campus, which is another Nikatsu one, which is maybe one of the most politically incorrect films I've ever seen. I'd be really careful who you show it to if you ever watch it. It's so utterly wrong on every level. But this guy was just a madman. I don't know anything about his personal background, but I really wish all his films were out subtitled for us English-speaking viewers, because from what I've seen, he's quite a guy.
Wow. Are these shot on video, or is this?
Yeah, they're all shot on film.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, because that's the one thing I don't like when I discover sort of either a fairly recent release of a Japanese film that's shot on video and it has that weird look to it that turns me off a little bit. Yeah,
like in the 80s, all the pink stuff started going to like shot on video. Those aren't so great, but these were like really well made. I mean, a lot of these were like shot in scope. I mean, they're really like well mounted. I mean, they're really impressive looking movies. But the subject matter, you're just like, what? I can't believe I'm seeing this stuff.
Wow, I'm excited. I'm excited to watch that. Mike, we'll answer your question in a moment. Okay, next on the list. I think that's 12.
Yep, number 12. So this is one that I picked. This encompasses kind of a bunch of different movies. So this is kind of a kill four birds with one stone kind of title. But it is definitely one of the. You'll notice that I have a lot of Italian and European movies on this list because it's where my heart is. But I love this movie. This is another one from the VHS era back in the days. I got the Vestron tape again, probably younger than I probably should have. And I saw it and I was like, oh my God, this movie is amazing. And that is House on the Edge of the Park from 1980, which is the movie that Ruggero Deodato made right after Cannibal Holocaust. I guess he hadn't gotten it all out of his system yet, so he was still, in a bad mood or something. I don't know. But this was part of a string of films in Italy that were cash-ins on Last House on the Left, which of course is the Wes Craven classic. One of the all-time sleaze classics. I don't need to tell you any more about that one. If you haven't seen it, just get on it. Although for me, I don't think Last House on the Left is so much sleazy as it is just sort of sad. I mean, it's kind of a bummer of a film. It also has the odd comic relief stuff. So I mean, it is a sleaze film, but there's more going on there. And again, it's this kind of like tale of the Vietnam era, kind of like cry of anguish kind of stuff. So it doesn't really have the fun factor to me. But it is a classic. But it's not.
It's yeah, it's depressing.
Yeah, it's a really rough one. This one is much more fun to me. But this is part of, they did a whole bunch of these ones, like Night Train Murders was kind of the first Italian cash-in on it, where it's the same plot. They just stick them on a train, but after that, it's the same movie. It's also Last House on the Beach, which is kind of the same formula, except they do it with a bunch of nuns by the beach, but it's the same movie. But this one is really interesting because they actually brought in David Hess, who did a few Italian films. He was also in like Body Count, for example, and Hitchhike, which is another really fun one. But in this one, he plays this hoodlum who's teamed up with John Morgan, aka Giovanni Lombardo Radice, who is famously the guy who always dies horribly in every movie that he's in, like Gates of Hell. He's the guy who gets drilled through the head in Gates of Hell. He gets castrated, make him die slowly. In the sect, he's the guy who winds up getting shot in the subway. and he's amazing in this movie. I think John Morgan actually managed to kind of almost steal the movie from David Hess, which is no mean feat at all. Because we know David Hess is a presence to be reckoned with on film and in person. If you ever had the privilege of meeting him at a convention, yeah, agree. The hairstyles, yes. But this movie is just spectacular. There are these two criminals who wind up getting recruited to go to this little soiree kind of in the outskirts of town at this fancy house being thrown by these rich people, and they proceed to terrorize all the guests when they aren't busy trying to have sex with them or disco dancing. One of the greatest disco scenes ever put on film, with John Morgan like shaking his butt to this really great Riz Ortolani like song that'll get stuck in your head for a week. But yeah, this movie is so much fun. Even though, like I said, it has a mean streak. There's a scene involving a razor that just still makes me cringe every time I watch it. You know, it doesn't pull its punches, but again, it has that fun sleaze factor though to it. Mainly because it has a twist ending that is kind of a make it or break it for some viewers. I love it. I think it's a great twist ending. In a way, it kind of almost feels like a forerunner for the Purge movies, where it winds up going, without spoiling stuff too much, but it kind of goes in that direction. Yeah. So you can almost call this like a Purge prequel in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. Again, I love Deodato, except when he's hurting animals. But like I said, but other than that, I think his stuff is great. He directed one of my favorite Plazio Tesco films, for example, and he did Raiders of Atlantis, was made after this, because I think again he kind of flushed all this out of his system and he wanted to do something fun. So if you haven't seen Raiders, thank God we just got that on Blu-ray from Severin. But that is like the other side of Deodato after this. But the fact he made these back to back, I think, is kind of staggering. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's speak to that real quick, because a lot of these filmmakers, I mean, they were fairly prolific, but they made so many different types of movies. I mean, a movie that's not on your list, I had it here a couple days ago. I guess I put it back. Devil's Honey. Yeah, it's one I'd never seen. I would consider that a super sleazy movie.
Very sleazy movie.
And it's like, you know, Fulci, that was like, I was listening to like all the special features. I feel maybe Troy was on that. I think Troy and maybe Stephen Thrower had featurettes on it. And so they were talking about how like this is like the first type of movie he's never really done this type of film before.
Right.
And it's interesting to me that specifically Italian filmmakers do everything post-apocalyptic, you know, stuff like Devil's Honey, stuff like House on the Edge of the Park. What do you think that was all about? Do you think it was just they were just able to get their hands on money and they had people who wanted a specific type of movie and that's just what happened? Or do you think they were consciously looking to change up their game?
Well, it depends on the director, because again, I think part of it's where the money was, and also where they look at someone like Alberto Lenzi, for example. I mean, he started off, you know, doing like, you know, historical films, and then he winds up doing these sort of high-end sort of cosmopolitan giallo films, and then he does you know, crazy horror films. He does some of the best, you know, Plazio Teschi that we've ever made. And then he kind of just shifts gears again. He starts doing all this weird 80s trashy supernatural horror movies. So it's kind of like where the trend was, or maybe they just get tired of it. You know, I don't know, because again, Italy's famous for writing trends. You've got Raiders of the Lost Ark knockoffs, Escape from New York knockoffs. You've got, you know, you got 80 gazillion spaghetti westerns after Sergio Leone did it. So it's who's going to finance it? You know, where can I get a job? What do I feel comfortable doing? I guess it's kind of a mixture of that. But yeah, Fulci's funny because, I mean, he did like crazy slapstick comedies, you know, before he was doing horror films or gialli or whatever. But he was actually good at all of it. Like, I don't think he really fell on his face with anything that he tried to do. Devil's Honey, it's almost like he almost kind of hit the erotic thriller thing a little too early, because when they announced this, I remember like in magazines like Gore's and all that, they thought it was a horror movie. It's like, oh, The Devil's Honey. Obviously, you know, this is Fulci. He did Murder Rock, he did Enigma. This is going to be another one of those. And you watch and you're like, no, not at all what this is. But yeah, Devil's Honey is really great. I remember that when I first came out on tape over here, it was cut a little bit, but even so, seeing the cut version, I was still like, wow, this is quite a movie. I mean, it starts off with a saxophone, the world's only erotic saxophone orgasm scene ever put on film, I guess. Woo, yeah, I love it.
Oh, that movie, I was like, man, I'll see Fulci in a different light after that for sure. Yep. Okay, number 13.
At number 13, so back to Joe D'Amato again, and this is the only film on this list that I've actually done a commentary for, but there's really no way I could leave it off, because this is one of the sleaziest films ever made, and that is Emmanuel in America from 1977. Again, where to begin with this one? Again, this is like about 10 different sleaze movies kind of packed into one 90-minute nugget. It is part of the Black Emmanuel series that Laura Gemser starred in. Started earlier in the 70s. It was not initiated by Joe D'Amato, but he's the one who made it great, I think. He's the one who kind of grabbed the reins and ran with it. He made the best ones. But he and Laura Gemser were just kind of they had that special chemistry together, and she did most of these with Gabriele Tinti, who was her husband, who died very young, and that's kind of what soured her in acting after he departed. But they're both in this one, as you can see from the poster there. And in most of these films, she plays a reporter named Emmanuelle who trots around the globe trying to find big stories, and that's what you get here. There's almost no plot; it's just her running around with this little camouflaged camera that's that goes. She holds it up every time someone's having sex or doing something crazy, So she winds up going to this kind of this brothel ranch for rich people, and she finds out what all these international diplomats are up to, and then she winds up coming across a snuff ring, which is a sequence that is so extreme and so jaw-dropping that it is supposedly what inspired David Cronenberg to make Videodrome. But wow. Again, if you think you're going in, I can't imagine audiences, especially in Italy, who saw this thing uncut, because in the US when it's hit VHS, they cut all the really strong stuff got cut out. But if you saw this in Italy in the theater, I can't imagine what people thought, because you think you're getting just this average softcore sex film, and instead you get, oh, here's some random hardcore sex. Here's a woman trying to get on with a horse named Pedro. Here's some fake snuff movie. Here's some weird comedy. And then you have this incredible soundtrack by Nico Fidenko, who did all these movies. He's an insanely good composer. But this is one of his very best scores. The soundtrack is just so damn catchy. It's just a work of genius, I think. I love having the CD around just to play it. I never lose my iPod. But so yeah, if you want to hear more about it, Bruce Holchek and I did a commentary for the Blu-ray from Mondo Macabro, so you can hear me yap for an hour and a half about it with Bruce. But again, it's one of my very favorite sleaze movies. There's nothing else like it out there, and now we can have it uncut in the US, thank God. But yeah, check it out.
That's okay. So let's take a detour into Laura Gemser country.
Mm-hmm.
She is Black Emmanuelle.
Yep.
And I'm not very familiar with this sub genre of movies. Maybe give me just a quick primer on Laura Gemser and the world of Emmanuelle.
Sure. So I should preface this that I don't think it's spoiling anything, because I think it's public knowledge now. But Severin is actually working on the complete Black Emmanuelle box set for Blu-ray. Even some of the ones that aren't really Black Emmanuelle movies are going to be in there. That can't come soon enough. I really can't wait. That's going to be just a thing of beauty. But so Laura Gemser, well, as most people probably know, Emmanuelle, the real Emmanuelle, was a film starring Sylvia Kristel, which was kind of the breakthrough theatrical hit in the 70s. That it wasn't porn, but the tagline was X was never like this. So this was an X rating, but it was like a soft X. But it was kind of one of those sexy films you could take that a couple could go to on date night. It was just hot enough to make a lot of money, and people were like, yeah, I'm comfortable with this. And it gets you in the mood when you go back home. It's one of those kind of movies. You don't feel too filthy afterwards. Although there's one scene involving a cigarette that's why it's still rated X. It kind of crosses that line a little bit. But anyway, so in Emmanuelle 2, Sylvia Kristel wound up having this scene where she gets this double body massage thing, and Laura Gemser is one of the masseuses, and obviously the Italians were like, wow, she's really gorgeous. Who's this other woman? And so Laura had her own spin-off series. The original Black Emmanuelle, which kind of aped the Emmanuelle formula. It's kind of like that, but a little more globetrotty, because the Emmanuelle films mainly take place, like in the Far East, and these ones kind of jump around a little bit more. But the weird thing is with the original Black Emmanuelle, they didn't actually tell her about this or the cast, but they wound up, for some territories, they inserted some hardcore shots into it with other actors. So depending on where you saw it, it was either a porn film or it wasn't a porn film. And that's something that occurs a lot in this series. So they weren't really shot to be hardcore porn, but the Italians being what they are, they're like, as porno chic was taking over, sometimes for some theaters, they'd be like, just throw a couple extra scenes in there, make it extra dirty. But they're not really hardcore porn movies at heart. Exactly. Except Emmanuelle in America throws a little bit of that in there, I guess, because they were like, if you can't beat them, join them. So just out of nowhere, you get this random scene where you're like, whoa, okay, all right. But they would kind of merge this with other genres. So you got things like Emmanuelle and Last Cannibals, which is Joe D'Amato's foray into the Italian cannibal subgenre. Now, the interesting thing, I guess I'm going to keep harping on this through this, but the interesting thing is Joe D'Amato was one of the only directors who did not want to hurt animals. So there's actually no animal stuff in his cannibal movie. So hats off to Joe. It's actually, if you want to see an Italian cannibal film, that's actually a pretty good one to start with, because there's actually nothing in it that's too bad. It just has a lot of sex scenes in the first half, and then it turns into this cannibal horror movie in the second half. Because sure, why not? It's Italy, I guess, whatever.
Right.
And then you got Emmanuelle Around the World, and then you had like these sort of side cash-in movies like Sister Emmanuelle. It was like, it's not really a Black Emmanuelle film, but it had Laura Gemser, so they're like, well, she plays a nun, we'll just call it Sister Emmanuelle, because whatever, it'll make money that way. So it's kind of hard to say what a real Black Emmanuelle film is, but there's a ton of them one way or the other.
Emmanuel in America, is that the one? A friend of mine was telling me that there's an Emmanuel movie where a horse is pleasured. Is that the one?
Right. Yeah. This is Pedro the horse, and it doesn't quite go into like full on bestiality porn, but it goes like right up to that point where you're like, cut. Okay, you can cut away now. And luckily, they do like right before it kind of goes over that line, but it's still more than you would expect to see. You're like, okay, the horse is excited, so let's just okay, enough, you know. But yeah, it's more than most movies would do at the time. If you ever, it's not as bad as like Florian Borowczyk's The Beast, which have you ever seen that one that has an opening with a horse where you're like, please, okay, enough, okay, enough scene. I'm good, you know.
Yeah, I'm not clear on why they feel they need to put those things in the movie. But so the Emmanuel franchise sounds like something that I guess is disguised as a softcore kind of thing, but they also have kind of hidden plots, right? Like they're not. It's not necessarily, oh, she just walks around and gets naked and has sex. There's like all this other stuff going in, and I think that's the part that interests me the most. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of these little episodic adventure films where and the weird thing is that Laura, like especially in this one, Laura Gimster doesn't really take part in that much of the sex. I mean, she does there's she hangs out naked in the sauna with like Lorraine DeSalle, who was in House on the Edge of the Park, for example. There's stuff like that, but most of the sex scenes are like other actors. Like she'll kind of walk through the brothel and like look at what's going on in there. You know, it's kind of like what Tinto Brass would do and stuff like Salon Kitty and Caligula. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, because again, Laura, she would do some softcore things mainly with her husband, but it's like she definitely would not do porn. But it's weird that like in this one especially, it's like she really doesn't do that much sex in the movie. A little bit, but not that much.
That's interesting. Do you know how many films are going to be in the box set by any chance?
I don't know what the final tally is. I think it's probably something like 12, maybe.
Oh, wow.
It's probably somewhere between 10 and 12. Because again, they're including some of the side ones. Like it'll have like, you know, you've got Sister Emmanuel and Divine Emmanuel, Love Cult, and kind of the ones that aren't part of the official series, but like Black Emmanuel, White Emmanuel, and things like that. So yeah, I assume it's going to be probably like 10 or 12 movies, but Dave Greger can probably tell you once it's all confirmed, I guess.
Gotcha. Hey, are you going to be on the special features at all?
Not that I'm aware.
Gotcha.
I don't know if they're doing the special features yet. I have no idea, but don't know.
Oh, well. Well, we're looking forward to it regardless. I definitely want to dig in to Emmanuel a little bit more. All right, 14.
All right. So back to something a bit more mainstream and probably, again, one of the better known films on this list. And this is Maniac from 1980, which is another one of the primo New York City sleaze films. Mm-hmm. This one usually gets classified as a slasher film, although I don't quite think it is because it isn't. If you want to call it a splatter film, it definitely is. Mm-hmm. Whether it's a slasher movie is a little more iffy because there was kind of this, especially like I said, 1980 was weird because you had all these movies all of a sudden that were about these loner guys. I guess now you call them incels. That term didn't exist back then, but these were like incel horror movies about these isolated guys who think they're entitled to women for whatever reason. They're like total creeps. And it's about how they sort of have a psychotic break and kill people. So you have Maniac, Don't Answer the Phone, Don't Go in the House, Toolbox Murders, you know, all this stuff. Eyes of a Stranger came after that. That kind of fits into that mold. Driller Killer, the Abel Ferrara one, for example. Although that one's weird because he only kills guys in that one. But, you know, but it's kind of this weird subset. So it's almost kind of like slasher adjacent, but I don't think they're really pure slasher films. It's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not really a straight up slasher, but it kind of shares some DNA, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But, yeah. But Maniac is probably the most famous out of that batch. And that's probably because it's one of the best. Bill Lustig, who made it, who of course is the guy who ended up founding Blue Underground, and he's still at it today. God bless him. You know, he directed this. This was kind of his first legit film. He'd actually started off earlier than that, you know, working on a couple of adult films. And this is just a really creepy, skeevy movie, but it's also just hypnotic. Like you just can't take your eyes off this movie. And I think a lot of it's because of Joe Spinell.
Yeah.
Who is also in Cruisin. Again, all these movies kind of keep tying together. But he has a crazy part in Cruisin. I won't give it away. Unfortunately, they supposedly cut a scene involving him in Cruisin where it turns out he's this like masochistic cop who likes getting spanked. But anyway, so in Maniac, he's this guy who ends up getting a date with Caroline Munro somehow. Again, this is almost a sci-fi film for that reason. But you know, but he's just kind of he has these mom issues, and his place is surrounded with all these mannequins, and he has these hallucinations. And at nighttime, he goes out and he stalks women around New York. It has this like crazy trippy ending, you know, but it just has this grungy look to it. It has the same look as like Basket Case, for example. Like they make a good double feature because they have this kind of grimy, dark look. Yeah, it is a masterpiece. I agree. And it has this great score by Jay Chataway. Again, it has that kind of like that Coke field kind of disco era vibe to it. It's all about the mood. Like there isn't very much plot to it, but there's just something really about it. I don't know, I like to put it on every now and then and just go back to it. Oh, thank you. And again, also even weirder is the fact this was in the middle of a trifecta of Joe Spinell, Caroline Munro films because they were like buddies. And so before this, they made the movie Star Crash, which is one of the nuttiest Star Wars ripoffs.
Yeah.
And so I guess they were like, hey, let's do a splatter film. Sure, why not? So they do Maniac. And after this, they'd make a horror comedy called The Last Horror Film, which people thought was going to be more like Maniac. And instead, they get this kind of goofy send-up of slasher movies that takes place at Cannes, where they're pulling all these prank shooting stuff, Jackass style, on the red carpet at Cannes. So, whatever. I love all three films for different reasons. But Maniac, it's a classic. Again, if you haven't seen it, drop what you're doing, watch that. And if you haven't seen Outer Pieces, I think those are the two to start with off this list. Get your feet wet and find out what these are about.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Maniac and Pieces are top tier, must watch. Maniac for me, the first time I watched it, I think it was, or maybe it was Anchor Bay who put it out initially. I don't remember.
Yeah, because Bill Lustig used to work for Anchor Bay, so he worked on a lot of stuff that went over to Blue Underground. So yeah.
Right. And I was shocked. I mean, it was just a grungy serial killer film, unlike anything I've ever seen. I was used to Silence of the Lambs and things like that, but this felt like that guy's nuts. This is really happening, man. It had that. Like that pulsing energy that is missing from a lot of these movies that try to be like this.
Yeah.
Maniac is the real fucking deal when it comes to like that, capturing that essence. And that's why for me the remake didn't work, because I felt they went in a weird direction with that. But they were trying to make an art movie, I think. What are your thoughts on the remake?
Remake is interesting because again, the tone is so different. I mean, it's very glossy, it's very slick. And Elijah Wood is not Joe Spinell. I mean, he's not even trying to be. It's a totally different kind of character. I will say I love the score. It's like one of my favorite scores ever. I do think the soundtrack is fantastic. I think as far as all those remakes go, compared to stuff like The Fog and Precinct 13 and all that, Prom Night, all that stuff, it's 9,000 times better than those for sure.
Right.
It doesn't hit the sweet spot as much as the original does for me. But it's not bad. I mean, it's a good shot, and I appreciate what they were doing. And like, it's just for the soundtrack alone, I got to give them props for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting choices, and I'm glad they didn't try to remake it, and Elijah Wood made it his own.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't stand up in terms of like, oh, this is going to be just as memorable as the original.
Yeah, it doesn't stick in your head the way that the original does, for sure.
No.
It doesn't like gnaw around in your head the same way. That's for
Right. Like, Jesus, I gotta get this out of my head and show other people so they have it in their heads now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to 15, which sounds very, very interesting.
Yeah, so this is a movie where it's either a sleazy film or it's not, depending on which version of it you see. A little confusing. This is a movie called To Be 20 from 1978, and this was directed by Fernando de Leo, who is probably, again, best known for making all of his cop movies, Polizio Tesco films. He made some of the best ones out there.
Yeah.
But he definitely had his sleazy side. Before this, he had made kind of a horror giallo film called Slaughter Hotel with Klaus Kinski that is so scuzzy. I mean, if it was either going to be this one or To Be 20 or Slaughter Hotel, I was kind of waffling between the two. But I went with this one because this one to me is, again, this one left me speechless the first time I saw it. I was like, I can't believe they actually filmed this movie and released it. And they probably can't either, because this movie caused such an outrage when they first released in Italy. They had to pull it and they had to recut it, and they recut the whole movie and gave it a whole different ending. That's how extreme it was. So if you get the DVD or the Blu-ray, make sure you watch the director's cut, because, okay, so here's the deal. This is a movie it's kind of a lighthearted film. It's kind of a sexy romp about these two girls who are hitching their way across Italy, mainly through the countryside. And they're played by two of the big kind of softcore comedy stars of the era, and that's Gloria Guida and Lily Carati, who are both actually really solid, like, comedic actresses, very photogenic, very charismatic, really likable women. And their characters are kind of jerks, actually, but they kind of sell it. It's because you like them so much. And they wind up falling in this hippie commune. Ray Lovelock is in it, who's like one of the great Italian sleaze actors. Anything if it has Ray Lovelock's name in it, that's pretty much the stamp of quality. But so it's all about these little misadventures they have, despite the fact that two women traveling alone, in the more conservative provincial areas of Italy might not be a great idea. And then the last 10 minutes of the film says, not only is it not a bad idea, we're going to show you what a bad idea it really is. And then they throw this ending at you that is one of the most upsetting things I've ever seen on film. Again, I don't want to spoil. I couldn't even describe what happens in it and do it justice, but it is still really shocking. Like, I mean, I can't believe that they thought they'd get away with this ending. So what they did was it was so much that they cut the ending off. The distributor was so pissed off, they cut the ending and they recut it. They took part of the ending where the girls are running through the woods for their lives. They stick that at the beginning and put voiceover like, "Ooh, that was a close one. Boy, we barely made it. Let's go have another adventure." And they recut the whole movie. So the whole thing is this lighthearted sex romp with no real payoff. Which is weird. So if you watch the two movies, you're like, this is two totally different movies. But the director's cut is one of the very sleaziest Italian films I've ever seen. It's one of those things where it's like they're trying to mix genres together, and they're like, let's just end it like a horror movie, because that's what people paying to see a lighthearted sex comedy want to see. It's like, sure, okay. But yeah, it is again, you could never make this movie today, not in a bazillion years, and expect anybody to pay money to watch it and be okay with it. But yeah, it is very much of its time. And definitely worth a watch, preferably with as little preparation beforehand. Just walk into it cold and you really won't believe what you're seeing. But director's cut only. Got to emphasize that.
Geez, Mike, I just checked. It's available on Blu-ray through Raro Video. It's $28.
Yeah. Get it on sale. Don't pay $28. You can get it cheaper than that.
You can get it cheaper than that? Okay.
Yeah.
And do you know if that has a director's cut by any chance?
Yeah, it has both cuts on it. So, but yeah, when you pop it in, just be careful. Watch the director. Well, you could do it either way, I guess. But either way, watch the director's cut, because that's the keeper of the two versions.
I was going to ask, because I love Fernando De Leo. I love his movies. And I was going to ask, I was not familiar with this movie, but I am familiar with Slaughter Hotel. So I was curious why you chose this one over that one. So thank you for explaining it, because they are, I mean, Slaughter Hotel, I mean, if you watch like the X-rated version, that gets pretty nasty.
It does. Yeah, Slaughter Hotel is, woo, yeah, boy. I also didn't pick Slaughter Hotel because I actually did a commentary for the British Blu-ray of that one, and I kind of talked myself out on that one. So you can just buy that Blu-ray and hear me like babble solo about that one for like an hour and a half.
There you go. Okay, let's take a quick break before we do the last 5. We got some questions right up here. Video Store asks, are these connected to the other female prisoner films? And he's talking about
the female prisoner scorpion films. No, it's more of a cash-in, because in Japan those were a very big hit, and it was a very popular series. And so Nakatsu was like, well, we're going to make these, because those weren't really sex films. They weren't very sexy. They're more like just action, bloody, revenge type films. But so Nakatsu was like, well, we'll kind of cash in on that a little bit. And so they kind of used the female prisoner idea to make these much more sort of filthy kind of softcore movies. So connected in a way that they were trying to ride that wave, yes, but not officially.
Gotcha. Mike asks, have you seen Female Prisoner Caged 1983?
Yes, also very sleazy. there's a ton of these. Yeah, there's a whole line of these. I said you could pick a ton of these, but yeah, I think Suck is the one that I just want to put a special spotlight on, because that is the one that just brought me back in my chair, and I was like, this is not like the other ones at all.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm actually gonna go after this. I'm gonna go check MVD and see if that's in the sale, because I think I need that.
I hope it is.
Mandroid says, hello, Master and Nathaniel. Thanks for the great show. Your top sleaze is my top films to watch. How can I reach Nathaniel if I'm not on Facebook?
Sure.
What's the best way people get a hold of you?
Well, the website would be mondodigital.com. That's mondo-digital.com. You can also email me through there. You can write me at info@mondodigital.com. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, etc., or LinkedIn if you want to go that way, I guess. A lot of different options there. But yeah, just email me through the site. That's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Quint says, Pam Lewis should have been Emmanuel. I'm not familiar with Pam Lewis. Do you know? I'm not sure. Okay, if you have no idea, then we'll move on. Sorry, Quint. I'll take your word for it, though.
Pam
I'll take your word for it. I answered Mike's question. It's on Blu-ray, and it looks like Nathaniel says we could find it a lot cheaper somewhere else. So that's the good news. Okay, moving on to the last 5. Here we go.
So now we're going to dip our toes into Vinegar Syndrome territory, although I guess technically this is Vinegar Syndrome / Severin territory now, because they threw it in a box. But Vinegar Syndrome is like one of my very favorite labels. They've done a lot of discoveries, but I think one of their greatest godsends to us from the cinematic heavens is a movie called Seeds from 1968 by Andy Milligan, which I think is his masterpiece. It is one of my very favorite Vinegar Syndrome discs. If I understand, it was not one of their hottest sellers, which breaks my heart because this is a masterpiece of a Blu-ray. If you don't have this, it is incredible, and the fact that it even exists is miraculous. So, Andy Milligan, if you don't know, was a Staten Island a man of many coats. He put on plays at many local theaters there. He was very misanthropic. Which was something that came through in the plays that he wrote, which he also turned into movies sometimes, where he would write original scripts, but they were all done on super low budgets, but he would do his own costumes. He kind of did a lot. These were very DIY productions with whoever was involved with his theatrical troupe at the time. But his dialogue is really like nobody else's. It's super acidic. I know people are starting to compare him a lot to John Waters, which is kind of that way, but John Waters is a little bit more playful. Andy Milligan just has this extra kind of venomous spike to it. And when it works, it really works. And there are some of the films where I think he's really firing on all thrusters. I think Fleshpot on 42nd Street is another one that people love a lot, with good reason, because it's amazing. And Severin did a whole box set of most of his surviving films, which I would highly recommend. But Seeds is just spectacular. It is a feat of screenwriting. It's kind of adapted from a play that he did, but it is really something else. This movie wound up getting taken by the distributor, and they chopped it to pieces, and they went and shot some other softcore scenes that they sort of stuck in at random, and it wrecked the whole film. It had no flow. It didn't make any sense, and they called it Seeds of Sin. But they managed to reconstruct Andy's original cut, and it is just a real marvel. It is about the very worst family reunion at Christmas time you could possibly imagine. You have this crazy mom who has to get these blood transfusions all the time from this quack abortionist doctor. She lives with her daughter, who's carrying on this incestuous affair with her brother, and like the other son is like this crazy warped priest, and all the relatives come and they all hate each other, and there's all these shenanigans with the household help out the will, and of course somebody starts killing them off one by one. But that doesn't even begin to cover the fun of this movie, because what's amazing is this movie has a major plot twist at the end of every single scene. And I'm not exaggerating. This movie turns on a dime over and over and over again, and it actually works. Like, all the twists add up on each other. And I can't think of too many other films that managed to pull this off. The only other ones offhand are maybe Wild Things, which is a film I love to death, the John McNaughton one, with Nev Campbell, Calling Back to Sydney, which is just a phenomenal film. And also a thriller that came out a couple of years back called I See You, with Helen Hunt, which is almost impossible, which is great, but impossible to describe because, again, it has like 20 plot twists. And if you try to even explain the plot, you just wreck it. So you're just watch this movie. Just trust me. And Seeds is like that. It's like, just sit down and just watch it, and you won't believe the way this thing unfolds. Just once you think you've got it figured out, it just keeps yanking the rug out over and over and over again. And it's just so much fun. Again, it's like, it's kind of a sleazy, sexy film. It's a slasher film. It's like a dysfunctional drama. It's a black comedy. It's everything. But yeah, if you want to get thank you. But yeah, if you haven't gotten this yet from Vinegar Syndrome, I would say just snap it up. I could name at least 30 other must-see titles that they put out, but this is the one that I think needs the most love.
It's interesting. I didn't pick up this disc, but I got the Severin, Milligan set, and I watched Seeds. Everyone talks about Seeds. I don't know. I wasn't as impressed, and maybe I need to rewatch it. But my first watch, I'm like, I don't get why people are praising it so highly, but I don't know. Maybe I just need to give it a second watch. Yeah,
it's with Milligan. It's like, it's kind of, you got to find the right time. It's got to be that right moment into that gateway that his movies are. It's I just, who knows? Watch it late at night again when you're kind of just a little bit like, whatever. Just put it on. You kind of just roll with it. Like, don't overthink it. You just watch it.
Gotcha. Yeah, the problem was the first time I watched it was I was watching it to review it, so I had my reviewer hat on. So I think maybe I'll just have my maybe drunk movie fan hat on and see let it wash over me, as it were. Speaking of that box set, what is your favorite on there besides Seeds? Do you have one that you would recommend? Like top 3 Milligan.
Top 3 Milligans. Wow. Okay. The biggest surprise for me, because it was a movie that was kind of a holy grail. So the earliest movie in that set is one called The Ghastly Ones, which is probably still his most notorious film. It was like an early gore film that he shot at his house in Staten Island. And he remade it as a movie called Legacy of Horror or Legacy of Terror, depending on which version you see, because there's a TV version. But it was only on VHS, and it was chopped. It was a TV print, and it was chopped. Like, all the gore was gone, and it was so dark you couldn't even tell what was going on. And so Frank Henenlotter, of all people, back because I used to work with him a lot on Something Weird titles, He was a big Milligan fan. He described to me seeing this in the theater when it first came out and describing all these like crazy horror scenes in it that you couldn't see. They were gone. And I was like, that's nothing like the movie I saw. So I gave up hope of ever seeing that. But Severn managed, they contacted the producer and they were like, do you have this? And he's like, oh yeah, I got the uncut version right here. Here's a print. And they're like, great, okay. So just seeing that was just really something. So I gotta say that's one of the three for me. And it's, even when people who reviewed that set, they kind of skimmed over that one. And I don't know why, because it's kind of amazing. It has some hilarious dialogue. It has some of the funniest lines I think he ever wrote. Just these little asides that people throw out. I mean, I was just roaring through like half the movie once you could finally hear what people were saying. Because on the tape, I was like, what? What are you saying? What? But yeah, Legacy of Horror, please, if you have the set, don't skip past it. It's a lot of fun. It's not just ghastly ones like warmed over. It's not. It's really something else. It's really great. Fleshpot, again, is a great one. But that said, I mean, a lot of those movies in that set, they're cuts that we didn't see because a lot of these movies were censored, like Bloodthirsty Butchers. A lot of the gore was cut out. So just seeing that uncut, it's a different ballgame. So like Bloodthirsty Butchers, the original cut of The Rats Are Coming, The Werewolves Are Here, stuff like that. Yeah, I'd say probably Legacy, Seeds, and maybe Bloodthirsty Butchers, I think. Just getting to see that with all the blood put back in. Yeah, maybe those three.
There you go. Awesome. Asian movie enthusiast is with us. Nice to see some Cat 3 stuff on this list. Red to Kill is one of my faves.
Red to Kill is great. Yeah, we need a Red to Kill Blu-ray desperately. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but yes, I agree. That's a great one.
One day. A video store says, love how Nathaniel is streaming from a pilot's house.
I don't know. I feel like from this angle, I should have like a smoking jacket and like a pipe or something.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, with that nice lamp back there. Absolutely. Okay. 16.
Or 17, right?
Sorry, 15. I have After Seeds. Yeah, we'll pick. You go off your list, and then I'll pop up the poster.
Okay. So the next one here is Fight for Your Life, which in a way is kind of the most tragic because it's almost a lost film at this point because all the original film elements got trashed in a flood. But at least it hit DVD, which is probably all we're going to get. My God, if you don't know what you're in for with this movie, be careful who you watch it with because things can go south really quickly. This came out kind of near the tail end of the blaxploitation craze, and depending on where this got shown, they would try to promote it as that or not. This again is a movie you would never see made today because it is about racial tension cranked up through the stratosphere, including every slur on both sides of the fence that you can think of because it's a home invasion film basically. William Sanderson, who of course went on to star in Newhart, where he's a lot more lovable than he is here. He is the leader of these guys who invade the home of this black minister and his family, and basically proceed to torment the hell out of him until the family decides to strike back. And when I say strike back, I'm not kidding. There's some stuff in this film that I've never seen in another movie. You even get one of the little kids just starting this film that just makes me howl. I can't believe they actually put it on film. But yeah, this is quite a movie. I think Blue Underground put this out on DVD. Around the same time, they did another film called Bone, which is like an early Larry Cohen film, which again is another script that you would never shoot that today. Again, these were much more loose, kind of dangerous times. And again, this film is kind of the epitome of that. People have either called it like one of the ultimate black power films or one of the most racist films ever made. It's all about how you watch it. I don't think the movie itself could be called real racist because of where it goes in the second half. You never sympathize with William Sanderson at all. I can't imagine anybody sitting through that and being on his side. Maybe I'm wrong and I have too much faith in humanity, but yeah, it's this movie's a wild ride. Again, I think it's too bad that we probably never get a Blu-ray unless somebody finds a pristine print lying around somewhere. But stranger things have happened, like the original cut of Seeds, so it could be.
I love this movie. I saw this. Was one of the first movies I saw when I moved to Los Angeles. It played at the New Beverly. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Tarantino programmed at one time at the New Beverly.
Yeah, and I'm like, holy crap, this movie's so, it's a wild movie. It's a lot of fun though, and that's a shame that there may not be a Blu-ray in the future. That's well, we'll see. Yeah, like you said, you never know what'll happen.
Yeah, maybe somewhere in Europe, somebody kept like a copy of it somewhere.
Yes, well, we can hope. Matt says the film William Sanderson wants I would forget.
Yeah, it's not exactly Blade Runner, is it?
Yeah, no. It says there's enough HD masters of Cat 3 films floating around on the Chinese internet. Interesting. I guess it's a licensing thing at that point. I mean, it's, even if it exists, it's will they give it up?
Yeah, I know there's some more coming. I know because, like I said, we had the Untold Story came out. I know there's more on the way. Thank God. Between the UK and here, I think you Category 3 fans are going to be pretty happy over the next maybe year or two.
Yes, I'm very excited for that. Travis says, "It's such a great conversation. Loving this, guys."
Thanks, Travis.
Great. I'm glad to hear that very much. Mando says they need to release The Alcove.
Yes.
What is The Alcove? I'm not familiar with that one.
The Alcove, it's a really good kind of really super like a soft, sexy film that Joe D'Amato did. It's not part of the Emmanuel. It's kind of when the Emmanuel cycle had kind of run out, but it's a really good one. It was out on DVD and on VHS. But yeah, I really wish somebody would do that on Blu-ray. I'm actually surprised Severin hasn't jumped on that because that is exactly the kind of movie they would do. But I don't know, maybe they will. But yeah, The Alcove is really good. That's one of his very best sexy films.
Wow. Well, they're too busy with Drop Dead Fred at the moment. So.
Well, yeah, and Overboard. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, those movies need to be restored. I kid. All right, next movie.
Okay, so again, I could not do this list without putting something in from Canon Films, and this is one of their very, very, very best. I love this movie to death. Again, super quotable, a real roller coaster of a film, and this is 10 to Midnight from 1983, starring Charles Bronson. If you haven't seen this movie, oh my God. Wow, this is probably one of the most purely fun movies on this list. Just from start to finish, every second of this is just pure ecstasy. You'll see Bronson in a way you've never seen him before in this film. He plays an LAPD cop, this guy Leo Kessler, and he's investigating some murders that are being committed by this psychopath played by Gene Davis, who is the brother of Brad Davis, and he also was in Cruisin. Cruisin keeps coming up. He plays this transvestite prostitute in Cruisin. But the thing is that to cover his tracks, he kills people while he's naked. So it's kind of a slasher movie, except the slasher is a nudist and he's with a knife. And but you also have this kind of normal cop side thing about his partners, Andrew Stevens, and his daughter's Lisa Eilbacher, which feels like it's out of a TV movie, which makes it even weirder. But this thing it ladles the sleaze on so thick. I mean, there's like these gory slasher murders. There's tons of nudity. There's this crazy dialogue. There's a scene with Charles Bronson like wagging a sex toy in the air. You know, he's like, "It'll be jacking off, isn't it?" This movie is just so much fun, and the climax. Like Kelly Preston's in this, very young Kelly Preston. She figures in the climax of the film. It involves this mass murder spree involved by the Speck murders of all things. It's like Beyond the Valley Dolls. It takes this crazy murder spree ending that comes out of nowhere. Again, it's been on Blu-ray a couple times. I think Twilight Time did it. Scream Factory did a reissue of it. If you haven't seen 10 to Midnight, I know this thing got attacked by the critics when it came out because they just don't know how to have fun. Because this is a great popcorn party movie with your friends for sure.
You know, it's funny when I saw that on the list, and I'm looking up the posters. I'm like, he can't mean the Bronson movie. I was expecting some Italian movie with the same title, like the Bronson movie. I almost texted you like, "Are we doing Bronson?" But then I was like, "All right, I'll grab the poster and we'll see what happens."
It's way sleazier than the poster. The poster doesn't do it justice, and the title has nothing to do with the movie. The title was actually sold. I think it was a can that Canon was selling its next round of movies, and they were like, "Oh, 10 to Midnight, we're going to sell something called 10 to Midnight." And Charles Bronson, they didn't even have a script. So it has nothing to do with 10 to Midnight whatsoever. But yeah, Bronson kind of did a couple of covert real sleaze gems for Canon. He also did one called Kinjite, Forbidden Subjects, that is really grimy. I mean, it is not like Death Wish. It's, Kinjite for sure. Kinjite is just super, super, super filthy too. Both of those movies, it's like, wow. Yeah.
Dude, I just got 10 to Midnight. Scream Factory put it out, right?
Yeah.
I just got that. Kinjite, I know I've seen them all, but I got to rewatch those. It's been such a long time.
Yeah. You got to see 10 to Midnight. It's oof.
That's amazing. All right, so see, Bronson made it onto the sleaze list, guys. All right, so the next one is one that I have a personal connection to. You go ahead and introduce.
Okay, I want to hear that then. Okay, so the next one. You got to have some female director representation here, and unfortunately, Catherine Bigelow did not get down the sleaze. Neither did Barbara Streisand. So you could either do Roberta Findlay, I think, who's one of the great sleaze directors, but I'm going to give it to Doris Wishman. And trying to pick a Doris movie is a little tricky because there's a lot to choose from, and she made some really fun ones. The Chesty Morgan films are sleazy. You've got Love Doll, things like that. But I'm going to go with The Amazing Transplant from 1970. This was part of a kind of a weird subgenre of penis transplant movies. I don't know how that was a thing for a little while. But the Brits had one called Percy that was a comedy about it. But this is kind of, I don't know if you know, there's a very famous French novel that was made into several movies called The Hands of Orlac, which is about a guy who loses his hands in an accident and they graft on the hands of a murderer, or he thinks they're the hands of a murderer, and so he winds up having the urge to kill people. Right. And this is like the dick version of that story. So why not? But this, again, it takes place in New York. Of course, it's in New York. All, half these are. But it's about this guy named Arthur, and he's running around just attacking women at random from his little black book. And they're trying to figure out why. The cops are like, "What's going on with this dude?" Because he used to be such a nice, kind of introvert, and he was such a kind of a nerd. And what's going on? Well, it turns out that when his best friend died, who is this super stud who had a reputation with the ladies, Arthur was like, "Well, before you get rid of the body, just he blackmailed a doctor. He's like, "Well, just give me his manhood while you're at it." And they're like, "Sure, why not?" So the problem is that his buddy was also kind of a psychopath, and he would be set off whenever he saw a particular kind of earrings. And so whenever Arthur sees these earrings, he turns into a homicidal maniac. Now, Doris Wishman, if you don't know, she had a very distinctive shooting style. She would not shoot with live sound, and she would cover her tracks a lot of the times by shooting the back of people's heads or their feet or some random object on the table or whatever happened to be around. So it's very almost avant-garde watching her films because you don't quite understand what space you're in from like one shot to the next sometimes. So again, kind of like Andy Milligan, it's kind of an acquired taste. You got to sort of acclimate yourself a little slowly to what she is, but once you do, it becomes really endearing. She was a very, very special director. I love Doris, and I think this, Doris, hey. No longer with us, of course, but I don't think she made a dull film over the course of her career. Nudist Camp movies, thriller. She did an absolutely nutty documentary about sex changes called "Let Me Die a Woman," which it feels like it should be on the sleaze list, although it's kind of a little too sincere, I think, to qualify. But it's also pretty outrageous. But yeah. So what's your connection?
I worked with Doris. I was on the crew for her last film. A film called Each Time I Kill, which is kind of unreleased, but we'll see what happens with this box set that's coming out next year. It was one of those things where I had made a film and with Linnea Quigley. Linnea was in it, and then I was talking to her, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna be," because she lived in Florida at the time, and I was in Miami. That was my hometown. And she goes, "Oh, I'm coming down to Miami for a couple of days. I'm in a Doris Wishman movie." And I went, "Wait a minute, Doris Wishman, why does that sound familiar?" And I had just gotten into like something weird and all that stuff, so I was familiar with the name. I'm like, "Holy shit, Doris Wishman, is she still alive? She's making movies?" And she's like, "Yeah." I go, "Well, contact the producer. I don't care. I'll be a grip. I'd like to meet her and see how she directs." And she changed how I thought directors directed. It's one of those things where I'll never forget. I actually ended up meeting my wife on that set, which is really made it extra special. But Doris, really nice lady, and to this day I treasure. I've got her autograph on my Something Weird, Bad Girls Go to Hell DVD, and Nights of Dismember she signed for me as well. And anyway, so on set, it's exactly what you said. She's talking the whole time. And Chuck Smith, her DP, has been working with her since Bad Girls Go to Hell. He was there, and we became really good friends. He's like, "Yeah, this is what she does. I'll say action, and she'll give direction during the take." And I'm like, "That's not how it works. Why would she do it that way?" And then she would give these odd directions. The actors would be like, "What? You want me to do what?" And I don't know. I will never forget my time on a Doris Wishman set. And I miss her dearly. I mean, I spent maybe like three or 4 weeks with her. I'm still good friends with Michael Bowen, who's writing her massive biography. And
that's got to be like 2,000 pages at this point, right?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, it was since he was working on it since that movie, so that was over 13 years ago, 15 years ago. I mean, it's kind of insane. But I'm dying to read that, and I'm gonna have him on the show talking Doris once that's out and the box set is out. But Doris, we miss you very, very much, and unlike any experience I've ever had on a film set ever, and so I was very happy that you had a Doris movie on here. And I'm surprised it wasn't like Bad Girls Go to Hell or the Chesty movies, because those are some.
It's hard. It's a real Sophie's choice trying to pick one. That's the one that I landed on though. Again, because like I said, when I was working at Image, I was handling a lot of the Something Weird titles, you know. So I handled a lot of the Doris Wishman, all that kind of stuff. And so I mean, I watched all of them while they were coming through, and you know, and but yeah, Amazing Transplant. I don't know, it really got in that special place in my brain for some reason.
Got in there, yeah.
But I love them all. I think they're amazing.
Yeah, it's very special cinema. Jesse Morgan and featured in Serial Mom. I'm not sure, but I know for a fact that John loves Doris. He's actually in the movie that I helped on, but they shot in New York, so I actually didn't get to meet him. But I did get to meet Fred, the lead singer of B-52s. He came out for a cameo, so I got to hang out with him too. That was cool. He's a big fan as well. Yeah, that's my personal connection to Doris in that movie in general. All right, so we're down to our last film on the list. If you guys, we're going to go for about 2 hours or so. So if you guys have any questions specifically for Nathaniel, type them in now, and we will address them after our final film, which is.
Well, I got to have Lucio Fulci in here somewhere, and we got to cap it off because he is one of the all-time greats, and nothing gets any sleazier than New York Ripper from 1982. A film so sleazy that in its uncut form, it is still banned in the UK to this day, which boggles my mind. This is another film that I discovered way back in the days on VHS. It was totally off my radar, I think, until Deep Red wrote it up, because I know Chaz Ballin was really trumpeting this one. And I read about it, and I was like, oh my God, this sounds like the most insane movie ever. Took some doing again to find it because it was a VHS, I think it's from Mid America, and it was but not something you just waltz into Blockbuster and get. But saw it, blew me away. I could not believe this movie. And I've seen it, I don't even know how many times since then, over probably 20 times over the years. I love this film to death. I know some people despise it, and I really feel so sorry for them that they can't find joy in New York Ripper, but oh well. But it is about a psychopath on the loose in the Big Apple who quacks like a duck, because of course he does. And he keeps calling the cops and taunting them. And Jack Hedley, the British actor, is the detective in charge, who of course spends his off hours hanging out with hookers, because of course he does. And the duck keeps calling him and making fun of him. And meanwhile, you have this subplot about a young woman and her husband, and she gets attacked in a movie theater after being chased through New York. And how that ties in, you don't quite know until the end. It actually goes super tragic at the end when you find out the motive. Lucio has a way of, like, again, pulling the rug out from under you, and this goes in a very odd direction at the end. It really kind of sticks with you, and I think that's why this one works, because it's like fun trashy. It's almost kind of like his version of Dress to Kill for the first maybe 2/3, and then it just gets really strange. Like the climax, it's kind of like a slasher film with like a full-on tragedy. But you get this incredible score by Francesco De Masi, where he's kind of like channeling like blaxploitation music almost. It's this really, really infectious soundtrack, but it really gets that grimy New York vibe down just to a T. Just the shots of people walking down the street, looking at all the theater marquees and the posters and the signs. I mean, it's thank God Blunderground put this out on UHD, because watching in 4K, I reach for the pause button. I'm like, ooh, 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 just to look at the backgrounds and some of the shots, because it's really great. But it's just grungy, like it's got stuff in like sex clubs and things like that. But it's beautifully shot, which is something that I don't think we really could understand for a long time, because, like I said, the VHS looked like garbage. I think I remember in Deep Red, I think he said it looked like it was shot on Naugahyde, which pretty much describes the VHS to a T, that it was a really good film. But it turns out, no, it's actually a really gorgeous film. It's very stylish. It kind of looks like an Argento movie in some shots. Really, really well made, actually, as we found out once we started getting good transfers of it. Once the Blu-ray started coming out. Before that, it just looked like garbage. But I don't know what else I can say about New York Ripper. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Again, it's kind of a divisive one, because some folks hate it. Even some Fulci fans think it's trash. But for my money, I think it's one of his very best.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of my favorites, and I don't know if you're aware, but this was also on Troy's list for Chicago. So great minds think alike. It's a good one. It's a really solid film, and it's one. Did this just get a 4K, or am I thinking of something else?
I think this was like the second 4K. That is right for Zombie. They did Zombie first in 4K, and then this one in House by the Cemetery. So yeah, they're cranking the 4Ks out.
That's amazing. Do you think we will ever get 8K, or do you think 4K is pretty much it?
Well, in Japan they have it, but I don't even know if your eyeball could process that. I mean, it's like after a certain point, it's like if it already looks like I'm watching it off the camera negative. Like, what else? What else can you get? How can you even perceive anything beyond that? I don't know.
Right.
I think I'm good with 4K for now.
Yeah, I agree. The next step might have to be holograms, where you're like in the movie. Right. I mean,
Yeah, once it gets to that point where it's a chip in your head, you don't even need the TV anymore, and it's all just like you're inside the movie. I guess we get to that point, but until then, yeah, I think 4K is more than enough for me.
Yeah. Well, once we're all chipped, though, that's it for physical media. All streaming. Okay, question time as we wind it down. That's an amazing list. What I'm going to do is when the show's over, in the descriptions, I'll just type it all out so you guys know, you'll be able to find it easier if you just want to write down the title and you remember what we talked about. Quint says, how about Death Kiss with the Bronson lookalike?
Yeah.
Did you know that film? I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, they were definitely aping Bronson there with the mustache. Yeah. That was one of those like VHS specials back in the day.
Gotcha. GK fan says, is there a list of all your commentaries online?
Yes, there is actually. If you follow me on Letterboxd, there's actually, because people kept asking that question. So if you go to letterboxd.com/Mondo Digital, if you look at my list, there's one that's called just audio commentaries that I've done. And I think it's a complete list. It's hard for me to say for sure because, like I said, back in the early days at Image, I would kind of jump in at the last second on some of those something weird ones. But the trick is that I couldn't use my real name. They had this stupid rule where if you were an employee, you couldn't be credited. So if you have some of those early something weird discs and there's a commentary and you hear someone say, this is Mikey T, because my middle name is Michael, that's actually me. I had to make up something on the fly just to credit myself because I couldn't use my real name. So I think there might be a couple of something weirds that I just can't remember, but I think it's almost, but it's what, 170 something movies or something like that. But yeah, you can see the full list online if you just check me out on Letterboxd.
That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, go to his Letterboxd. When I'm done here, I'll put that in the description as well. Mike says, thoughts on Giallo in Venice?
Woo! Very sleazy. Yeah, so that's part of this weird, like the Giallo as we knew it in the late 70s was kind of dying out. So they started merging it with like really graphic sex like that and like Play Hotel and Sister Ursula. That's kind of, there's like the three really big sleazeball ones. Giallo in Venice, it's not a good Giallo, but it's very entertaining. It is something else. That is about as scuzzy as the Giallo can possibly go. But yeah, that's a fun one. I was glad to see Troy did a commentary for that one. I think he was having fun with it. With the if you haven't heard it, he has a funny running joke about eggs. I won't say more than that. But
that's awesome. I thought you were going to say it's not really a Giallo and it takes place in Florida.
Right.
That doesn't really live up to the name then. All right, I've got to add that to the list. I've heard it talked about before. That's a new one to me. Travis, he loved the commentary you did for Emmanuel in America. We talked about this. So far, you don't know if you're going to be involved, but do you know if that movie is in the box set?
As far as I know, I don't think they've locked down exactly what the specs for the box are. I know they're working on it because the trick is that some of these movies, like Full Moon, has two of them. So I think they're figuring out what the deal is about getting those in there. And Mondo Macabre has Manual in America, so I guess they're negotiating that. So don't quote me, but I think it is. At last I heard, but I don't think this is all locked in. Like, I don't think the special features have really gone into full gear yet. Dave Gregory, don't slap me if I'm saying something wrong. I don't know. He's the guy running the show. But so I don't know yet. But at last I heard that they were planning on putting it in there. Gotcha.
There you go. So stay tuned for that. I don't know if we'll see it this year, guys, but you never know. You never know. Mandroid, did anything Joan Collins make the list? Not exactly.
Not quite, although I think either the stud or the bitch probably could have. Those would be pretty close. if we're talking, I didn't really do much British-wise on this one. The Brits, I don't know, the British sleazy stuff, it's still just a little toned down. Like, it doesn't quite hit that outrageous level. But yeah, I think that the Joan Collins ones get pretty close. And there's some Pete Walker ones that I think might have made the list too. Or Norman J. Warren. But yeah, it is weird that I didn't really go very British heavy on this one. But yeah, I think maybe the stud could have gotten on here.
The stud, what a name!
The stud is kind of a riot to watch, but it's more campy than sleazy, though. I think.
Right. Yeah, we were looking for sweaty, uncomfortable movies here. Yeah. DK fan says, intrigued about Gestapo's last orgy in your commentary in 88 films with them doing the U.S. releases. How's that going?
I am so glad that commentary is going to see the light of day because that was I can't remember if Troy talked about how that all went down, but just in a nutshell. So 88 contacted Troy and they were like, hey, we want to do a commentary for this. And Troy was like, hey, do you want to write Shotgun? I was like, sure, why not? I've never done a Nazi exploitation film. Let's do it. And I just assumed that it had been cleared because, in the UK, things have to be submitted to the BBFC, which is like their version of the MPAA, except the problem is that over there, it's a law. If it doesn't get passed, you can't release it. Whereas the MPA, you have the option of just not getting it rated, which means less box office, but they're not going to arrest you for putting it out. Like, you know, unrated Reanimator is not going to get you thrown in the slammer. Right. So I just figured it had gotten cleared. Well, it turns out they hadn't actually gotten it cleared yet. The BBFC was like, no way in hell. There's no way you can cut this movie down and get it passed. It's just not going to happen. So I thought the commentary was just going to go into a vault. But luckily, 88 Films was like, no, you know, we're just going to follow the footsteps of Arrow Video, and we're going to do this in the US. So I really hope this is like maybe the first of several titles they're going to put out here, because I would like to see them not be constrained by the BBFC anymore, because I'm kind of annoyed with like Shameless and guys like them, you know, having to slice their movies down. It's really irritating. Like I said, I can't believe New York Ripper, they still have to cut the damn movie. That's in this day, it's ridiculous.
100% agree with that. Bumpy, Hitchcock's Frenzy has some sleazy moments. Interesting to see what he would have done if circumstances were different. You mean Hitchcock? Yeah. Frenzy is kind of like, that's his one bona fide R-rated movie, and it is pretty sleazy. Actually, it's about these strangulation murders, but he has like some full-on nudity in it and that kind of thing. Although what's weird is he was planning on making an even sleazier movie. Frenzy came out of a different film that he was making called Kaleidoscope. And if you go online, just type Hitchcock Kaleidoscope, I would recommend you do it and just do an image search, because they actually did a ton of like test photos for it, and it looked really trashy. It's kind of a shame they didn't make it, but there's all these shots of like naked women running across docks in London, getting chased by a guy with a knife and all this stuff. And I'm like, this looks like a full-on slasher movie. But I guess they figured that it was like a little too much, so they toned it down. So he found this book that it was adapted from. So this is kind of like his almost but not quite proto slasher movie, but it kind of feels like that. That's awesome. Video Store says, I've added 5 of the 20 films you listed, so thank you.
You're welcome.
There you go. Lots to watch. Paul, a patron of mine, says, you wrote for Video Watchdog, and now that the magazine has folded, what's another good magazine zine? Well, Mondo Digital. Paul, that's his main website. I guess give us the Mondo Digital spiel and what people can expect if they go check out the site.
Well, yeah, if you go to the site, I mean, again, I review stuff either when it hits or before it hits. I try to focus on, you know, the international scope of things. So like different versions of movies released in different countries. That's kind of like what I try to focus on. So like, how does the European Blu-ray of New York Ripper compared to the Blue Underground one, for example, or the different releases of the, you know, Lorazzo's Vampires, that kind of stuff. But there are actually some like print magazines that are still thriving. I would say if you haven't, you should definitely. Well, the one that is closest to my heart because he's still alive and kicking is Shock Cinema, which is like one of the all-time great magazines. I've discovered so much through them because they focus on pointing out movies that are just really, really unknown. But they really know how to dig around and find the diamonds in the rough. But Shock Cinema is a great one. Diabolique magazine is really solid. They put out some really good stuff. And there's tons of them. You know, Fangoria, of course, is back from the dead in one of its, was this like the 5th incarnation now, I guess? I don't know. So they're back. You know, it's still out there. I mean, it's a shame Video Watchdog had to fall, because I love Video Watchdog. It was, I was so thrilled that I got to write stuff for them. It's actually weird because I wrote a letter into them. It was my first thing that ever got printed. It was about Tommy, Ken Russell's Tommy, when it came out. But I got to an article because my first job when I moved to LA was I actually worked at DreamWorks for about a year. That was kind of my foot in the door. And I worked on The Haunting, the awful 99.
Oh, yeah.
But I actually got to watch it unfold because I was handling the screenplay process for it, how it was getting rewritten. All these ghostwriters brought on, including Michael Tolkien of all people. They brought in all these script doctors to try to fix this movie. But it kept getting worse. Like every draft, it got worse and worse. And so I wrote an article for Tim for Video Watchdog about comparing the book and the original movie and this movie, and like where it all went awry and the differences and how this movie got sort of trashed in the process. So I don't know if you have that issue, you might want to go back and read it, because that was kind of special getting that in print and Video Watchdog. I mean, I reviewed stuff later after that, but that's the closest thing to my heart that ever got published. So again, thank you, Tim Lucas, for letting me let that be my real inauguration to the Video Watchdog world.
I love it. That's so awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's a magazine that is near and dear to my heart, for sure. So guys, go check out Mondo Digital, mondo-digital.com. A link will be in the description towards the end of the show. You have to go look that up. I saw a question here. I'm trying to find it. Chris says, love your knowledge of films. Nathan, keep on making information flow.
Thank you. Oh, before I forget, back to the Chesty Morgan question about Serial Mom, though. But yes, Chesty Morgan is in Serial Mom. There's the scene where they do I don't know if you remember. There's the scene where they do the parody of Silence of the Lambs, where you have the parallel actions going on, where they're tracking her,
Oh,
and they wind up busting into his best friend's room by accident because I think he's being murdered, and he's actually jerking off to Chesty Morgan, which is like one of the first things in the movie that he's masturbating to a Doris Wishwood movie, which is. I don't think anyone could actually physically do that in real life, but yeah, I think that was John Waters' joke.
You'd be surprised.
I'm sure someone somewhere has done it somehow.
Chesty is one of the best. Video review. What did you think of The Passing?
Oh, I like The Passing. Yeah, that's a cool one. Yeah, that was when the Vinegar Syndrome was kind of like veering off away from their usual stuff into kind of the more avant-garde artier fare that they kind of like do. Their sister labels or the partner labels do that a lot now. But yeah, The Passing's a cool one. I was really surprised they put that out. It has a lot of really good bonus features. But yeah, The Passing's really good. It's kind of like another one I'd recommend is The Caller. That's another one they did, which I think it's almost impossible to classify, but it's one of those where it's like it's kind of a genre film, but it doesn't really feel like one because it doesn't quite play by those same rules. But yeah, I like The Passing.
Nice. Mike asks, "Oh, what did you think of Malabimba?"
Oh my God, super sleazy. One of the sleaziest Exorcist ripoffs out there. Another one that Severin did. Bless him. Yeah, I love all those Italian, really trashy, sexed up Exorcist copies they did in the 70s. I don't know why they thought like the thing that the Exorcist needed was like more sex scenes. That wasn't really my takeaway from it, but apparently somebody thought that was a good idea. So, but yeah, this is one of those. And yeah, Malabimba is lots of fun. It's kind of in the same spirit as something like Patrick Still Lives. If you haven't seen that one, that's another good one that kind of has a similar vibe to that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember seeing the slip for that one, and it's like there's nudity all over this. So this movie is going to be a crazy one. This is an overall question, more on the craziest, nastiest moments in Nikatsu Roman porno released by Impulse Pictures.
Oh gosh.
So I'm guessing, well, maybe a top 3 of those type of films you can recommend.
Well, there's a whole series that they did called the Zoom Up films. There's one that's called Zoom Up Beaver Girl, for example. But anything that has Zoom Up in the title, I would say pick up because those movies are really fun. They tend to take place in apartment buildings, and it's all about like people who are like addicted, like voyeurism and like snooping on their neighbors and all this stuff. And my God, they're so much fun. And these movies are all pretty much like an hour long. I mean, I think the longest they hit is like maybe 70 minutes, but they're really short. So you can knock out a couple of these with like no effort whatsoever. But yeah, all the Zoom Up films are great. All the women in prison ones are really fun. But some of the comedies are fun too. I can't remember there's one about the shellfish divers. The name escapes me right now, but there's actually a comedy they did that's actually really, really funny. And like, but filthy at the same time. Fairy in a Cage is a really good one. Again, that's one of the few that's on Blu-ray. But yeah, and definitely White Rose Campus. I'd say go and grab that one, pick it up because that one really, I think that's if you want to see how really super, super nutty these Nikatsu Roman porno films could go, that one is pretty much at the outer limits of it.
White Rose Campus. All right. I'm going to write that down. That sounds pretty good to me. Let me, okay. Venus asked a question about the site. About a search engine.
That is a good question. Nobody ever asked me to. There's a review index on there. There's a review page, but yeah, I could do a search button. Yeah, why not? Sure.
Hey, there you go. Video store. Stay tuned for that. Chris says, any idea when Shaw lets Exploitation Boutique labels run free with their vault elements?
That's a good idea. That's a good question because I know Arrow just did a big deal. As you may have seen, they just announced this big Shawscope box set, but that is almost entirely Kung Fu films, except for Mighty P. Kingman. But they said they have a ton more in the works, and I'm really hoping that they get a little bit further down into the grubbier depths of what's in the Shaw library because there's a ton. I mean, 880 Films has been doing it a bit because they did like Bewitched and you can get the Black Magic films, for example, and things like that. But there's a lot that no one's touched, like Boxer's Omen, as I mentioned. Is one I can't believe no one anywhere has done that one. It's baffling that still hasn't happened. It's only on DVD. There's one called Lost Souls, which is one that I pushed for to come out on DVD back in the day. It's really great. But there's a few. I know Human Lanterns is a really trashy one that's finally coming out. That's hitting Blu-ray at last. But Human Lanterns is really, really, really scuzzy, really gory. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a matter of like which ones they have lined up to do HD scans for. Maybe that's my guess. So again, we are getting them, but they're just getting kind of doled out a little slower than I wish they were. But you know, who knows, being an 88, I think is our hope there, but Arrow's, they're finally getting into it over here. So, you know, I guess we'll see, but yeah, maybe someday Vinegar Syndrome or somebody like that will do a deal with them and they'll really get to the super sleazy movies, because there's a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, they just kind of really started. So if it becomes successful, who knows? Down the line, we may get a box set of just all the crazy sleazy ones. Chris says, I saw Boxer Woman on 35 and my face melted. Yeah, that'll
I
happen.
think mine did too.
Yeah. That's the best kind of movie. In all seriousness, how do you find time to watch all these films? How many do you watch a day? What's your routine, etc.?
It's tough. It's really tough. And I got to say, it's actually harder now because I'm trying to review all these gets tricky because the special features are so much more sensitive than they used to be. So now you've got labels like Indicator who are putting stuff out. When I get one of those box sets, I mean, it can take me up to like a week to go through some of those because they're so dense. I mean, when they send me one of their Hammer horror sets, I mean, it takes a long time to go through those because you've got, 4 commentaries and like 12 interviews. And I mean, it's like, Jesus, guys, oh my God, you're killing me here. You know, and some of the Vinegar Syndrome stuff. I mean, for God's sakes, when they did their Happy Black Friday sale and they sent me like Surf 2, and I was like, it's going to take me like 3 days to go through this disc. You know, it's like it's 2 packed discs.
Yeah.
Or when they did Spookies, that was like, I mean, it has like all these, there's like a 2-hour documentary on there, you know. So I don't know. I don't sleep maybe. I drink a lot of coffee. Luckily my day job allows me, I can like have movies running in the background sometimes. That helps too. But yeah, it's all just time management. Luckily I really love movies. You know, I'm used to devouring the stuff I have since I was a kid. So it's just part of my routine. But yeah, it's just sheer dedication and force of will, I guess.
It's a nice job to have. You get to watch all these movies and share your love of them. That's pretty amazing. By the way, I haven't mentioned this, but if you're new here, do subscribe. And while you're watching, drop me a thumbs up. That helps the video, helps the show. And your Philly Neighborhood Mastercast is not monetized because YouTube sucks. So if you want to support, go on over to Patreon or buy me a coffee. Links in the description. Okay, Planet Mondo says, any sleazy movies you'd recommend that are surreal along the lines of Holy Mountain, Mansion of Madness?
Oh, yeah. God, there's a lot. Well, there's one that Mondo Macabre did. Well, actually, they did the DVD and then indicated the Blu-ray. There's one called Born of Fire. That's kind of along those lines. That's a very, very surreal one, really trippy. Let me think. I mean, obviously, beyond Holy Mountain, anything else by Jodorowsky would qualify. I think. I mean, Santa Sangre, I would hope you've seen, but if not, that should be at the top of your list. That's one of my all-time favorite movies, period, of any kind. What else? I mean, of course, I mean, surreal horror is kind of more in vogue now. You have a lot of things like Mandy and you know, Black Coat's Daughter, you know, stuff like that. But I assume you're talking more like retro stuff, or more like in the 70s. I would say The Haunting of Julia, maybe. That's a really good Canadian horror film with Mia Farrow, but that also has kind of a nice sort of surreal edge to it. It's very dreamlike. That's a really good one. Obviously, Dario Argento's Inferno. That's about as surreal as you can go. I mean, it's almost plotless. That's just a total, like, just, you know, head trip of a movie. That's a really great one. Yeah. I don't know if that's along the lines you're looking for, maybe.
And there you go. Yeah, and if anybody in the chat has any to suggest, feel free to do that. Video Store has another question. Have you ever thought about launching your own label?
It's come up. Again, I did it for 10 years with Image. It wasn't my label, but again, I was running the cult end of it. So again, like I was kind of babysitting Something Weird and the Euroshock line and the Ted Michaels and all that stuff and all the Redemption titles. So I could. Again, it's an investment. It's possible. I have thrown the idea around with a couple of friends of mine. We've sort of, that football's been tossed about, so it could happen someday. We'll see.
There you go. That's always something I've always wanted to do, and I looked into it. But man, it's just paperwork is such a headache, and that's my fallback. I hate that.
It's the biz. I would need like kind of what Don May has, because Don May runs Synapse. He has a business partner who kind of handles more the paperwork side of things, because that's what I hate. So yeah, if I can get that right balance out with the right business partner, I probably would. But yeah, I don't want to sit around just filling out business paperwork all day. I would just shoot myself. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is the drawback to having that kind of job. Let's see. Mandroid says another title ripe for Blu-ray is Tinto Brass's Deadly Sweet.
Might be coming.
Oh, okay.
I can't say.
You heard it here, folks. Confirmed. Confirmed.
I didn't say it.
Okay. We won't say anything. We'll keep it under our hats. That's awesome. That's good to know.
I will say, since you're about Deadly Sweet, though, I really hope, because I don't know, but assuming that it does happen, which I know that it's in discussion, but I really hope they can put out the English version because it's very different, and the English track is actually great. So I know there are a couple of labels that are looking at it. So if it happens, for the love of God, please, 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 please put the English one on there because it does exist. It is out there. I can tell you where it is, but make it happen.
There you go. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Nathaniel, we didn't talk about your honorable mentions. So you want to go just off the top of your head what's your honorable mentions that didn't quite make it, but you do recommend?
Sure. Well, I know I rattled off a few along the way here. I think I mentioned some, but actually a shout out to Mark Walco. He actually replied to my tweet about this, but he reminded me of one that I should put on here. It's called Act of Vengeance, which he called out as the one with the hockey mask guy in a jockstrap whistling jingle bells while he attacks people. It's a rape revenge film that actually MGM assumed ownership of, and they put it out on Blu-ray through, I think it was Scorpion? I think Scorpion Releasing put it out. So you can find it. The original title was Rape Squad, but they realized there was no way you could show it with that name. And it's actually not about a squad of rapists. It's about a squad of women who get back at a rapist. I should
right.
But that's a fun kind of quasi-feminist sleaze film. That's a fun one. I would almost I mentioned Driller Killer, but it seems like early Abel Ferrara I would put on this list. I think Driller Killer, Ms. 45, Fear City, that kind of stuff. I mean, early Abel was like really sleazy. But again, he's also kind of arty, so he's kind of on that tightrope in between. But I'd say any of his early films would qualify, and I would recommend. And then, again, when we were defining sleazy, I said that I didn't want to do movies that were just based on the sex and violence quotient, because that in of itself wasn't enough, because that rules out a lot of, like, there's a lot of shot on video junk that, that's sleazier than these, but it's just not very good, and I don't want to talk about it. But there are a few, like Troma's done a few that I think are noteworthy. Of course, Bloodsucking Freaks is like probably the big one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the all-time sleaze classics. You kind of have to separate it because the director had issues. That's a whole other thing. But if you can set aside who made it, it's kind of I think it's fun as a dark comedy, because as much as people think it's offensive, it's also kind of hilarious. There are some like visual gags in that movie that are like really sophisticated. Where I actually just bust out laughing at just how smart they are. He'll do stuff in the same shot. I'm like, what maniac thinks this up? I mean, that's actually hysterically funny. Like the hobby horse scene, if you know what I'm talking about. I'm like, that's actually brilliant, like blocking how they do that.
Yeah.
So I would say Bloodsucking Freaks. They're the first the Toxic Avenger films, of course. Stuart Gordon probably deserves a shout out because I think he was an underrated genius. Everyone loves Reanimator, but I think his entire output pretty much just great. Also just a smart guy, one of the smartest, I think, sleaze guys out there. God, what else? Geez, I mean, we didn't even touch on some of the Indian films. I mean, some of the Ramsey brothers films are kind of sleazy.
Yeah.
All that's coming. We've had one came out from Massacre Video. I know some more is in the pipeline. But yeah, some of the really gory Indian horror films are really fun. So yeah, there's a lot of avenues to discover. Again, you probably just go to my site and just browse for a couple hours. You'll probably find some more that I'm not thinking of. I mentioned Valerian Brovchek, who's kind of like also a good example of that art sleaze hybrid we were talking about, because he could get so sleazy. I mean, you watch something like The Beast or Dr. Jekyll and His Women, which Arrow put out, which is it's like the scuzziest art film you've ever seen. It's like you're like, wow, this is so pretty, and I feel just so unclean watching this at the same time. It's one of those.
Well, yeah. Just thinking about that. My God. Yes, and guys, we'll have Nathaniel back on. We have to think of something to make a list about, but he'll be back on because he's been a wonderful guest. I had a good time chatting sleazy, and we ran the gamut. I mean, we had Emmanuel, we had dick transplants. We had a little bit of everything.
Charles Bronson.
Remember tomorrow on Let's Watch at 3 p.m. PST, we're watching Psycho Cop. That is tomorrow, Saturday. Let me look at my calendar here. The 24th. We'll be watching Psycho Cop here live on the channel. Bring your popcorn, bring your snacks. It's always a good time to watch crappy movies together. It might be a good movie. Who knows? Just double check to make sure. Okay, Chris says, love you, Nathaniel.
Thank you, Chris. Love you too.
Bumpy says, great show. Thank you both. Thank you. All right, let's call it a day. Nathaniel, thank you so much. What an honor to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
And you will be back. Hopefully Hopefully you had as good a time as we did.
Thank you.
All right. Guys watching at home, thank you so much. Remember, I love you. I love you just the way you are. Take care of yourselves. Remember, it gets better. I promise you, hang in there. And until we meet again, this has been your friendly neighborhood Master Chaos and Nathaniel Thompson, signing off for now.